Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm your host, Shane McInnes, and it is a very special viewer requests night. Hello, Honeycomb. Hello to my dear, sweet, loving wife, and hello, Kyle. I hope you all are having a good afternoon, day, morning, whatever time it is where you're located. I hope that it is doing well for you. We are here an hour early, and that is by design and on purpose. Tonight's discussion.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
Who wants to praise that Caesar guy anyway? Hey, Ethan, welcome. We're starting an hour early on purpose because I suspect that there will be lots of questions and lots of interaction on this particular topic. And the topic is Nazi occultism. We get to start early. Hey, Arcadian, welcome. Yeah, it's a weird topic. It is one that I was fairly excited to talk about in a weird way because I sort of like weird history. Time to fact check all that you know about Wolfenstein. Well, we'll actually talk about Ubersoldats and Gottsmenschen and all that fun stuff later. So not all of that stuff is wrong. I thought a long and hard time about whether or not I was going to work in a lot of really goofy stuff like Wolfenstein, like Hellboy, but I figured that there was probably enough in the reality realm that was weird and sort of bizarre that I didn't really need to add the goofy stuff. And there's Vern, like, should you break out your copy of Hellboy? Now in issue 2 of Seeds of Destruction, if you'll look at the first panel. Hey, Vern, welcome. Yeah. So this is viewer request night. The show itself is Adventures in History, where we talk about historical topics and events and themes, and we have a good time while we do it, because history doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be just reserved for old dudes that sit in moss and dust-covered rooms translating ancient volumes of stuff by Rasputin's ghost. No, history can be for everybody, and it indeed is here for everybody. So I'm hopefully going to talk about some stuff tonight that gets some people sort of excited and riled up in a good way. We will be covering stuff tonight that is very adult in nature. I'm not going to be showing any sort of pictures of anything like the Holocaust. We're not going to talk about anything where I drop curse words or anything like that, but we will be showing some photos of some symbols that have swastikas on them. So be aware going ahead. This is going to be some weird stuff, and it's sometimes going to be some uncomfortable stuff, but this is very much what is history, right? History doesn't always make us comfortable. And it should not make us comfortable, because people in the past have made mistakes just like we make mistakes now. And, I thought by adult you meant Hitler in the nude. No, we will not be showing any pictures of Hitler at all tonight. We will be mentioning Hitler, of course, but I decided that I did not need to show his photo. But the obligatory forget Hitler and all the Nazis should go to the bad place. Yeah, Nazis are bad. I should say that off the top, too. Nazis are bad, racism is stupid, and if you think that 0.01% of your DNA makes you any better or makes somebody else any worse, you are an idiot, and I will be happy to get on a Discord chat or a Zoom meeting or something and call you that to your face if you would like. Racism is stupid. It has caused people to do some really stupid things throughout the course of history. And because of the Holocaust that the Nazis committed, somewhere in the range of 12 million people were killed. So yes, the Nazis were not good people. I will not be praising them at all tonight. We are mostly going to be looking at the roots of where a lot of their ideas came from. Because, what a lovely starting sentence. You love it here. Hey, Green Eyes, welcome. Hope you're having a good one. Yeah, Nazis aren't nice people. And I think that should be an understood statement. I will remind everybody, for those of you that might be new here, we do have an official fortune. You know that in the United States, when you get Chinese food, you get a fortune cookie, which has a neat little fortune in it. And I have been saying this particular thing for a long time, and I finally pulled it out of a fortune cookie, so I kept it, and I now call it the official fortune of the stream. And because it came out of a fortune cookie, it cannot be denied. And that is, of course, if I can get it to zoom in. Focus. Focus. Here, let me do it like this. We all have a lot more in common than it seems. Yeah. And that came out of a fortune cookie. So you can't argue with it. And no, you can't have my secret lucky numbers, because those are mine. We have come to bury Nazis, not to praise them. Indeed. Okay, so here's the thing. We're going to be talking about a lot of weird stuff tonight. This is a viewer request episode. Viewers asked for this. Viewers voted for this. This is what I hope you all were after when you requested the topic. But prior to starting the sort of discussion in general, I do feel the need to make several points of understanding. And one of those we've already made, and that is Nazis are bad. If at points in the discussion tonight you go, how did people believe that? Well, let's remember that the world we are discussing, and we're going to be talking about things roughly from the 1880s until about the 1940s. During that period of time, there was not as much understanding of the natural world. Science was definitely a thing that was growing, but they did not know as much about science as we do now. They also did not know as much about history as we do now. The field of archaeology for the majority of our discussion period tonight was very, very new. It was somewhat a hobby of rich people, and it was not necessarily as scientifically done and recorded as it is now. So these people knew less about history, less about science, and even though the field of genetics was becoming something that people thought that they understood, they did not understand most genetics. They had a very rudimentary grasp of genetics. They did not know what DNA was. They did not know about DNA testing. They did not know about genes or anything like that. They had some basic knowledge of phenotypical traits, which is basically the way that we look. And you've probably heard about Gregor Mendel doing the little squares where you have this color flower and you have this color flower, and if you breed them 4 times, it makes this color flower twice. And you've probably heard about that stuff. That's about the maximum extent of scientific knowledge that existed that was provable. However, there was a lot of scientific-esque stuff that we call pseudoscience that was going around. There was a lot of pseudo-historical gibberish that was going around, and there was a lot of really bad archaeology going around. I am Batbird, welcome. It must be true if it came from a fortune cookie, absolutely. The weirder the better, says Brittany. Well, we're going to get to the weird stuff. Nazis are bad? Absolutely. I can tell you by the bumps on your head and the humors of your body. Yes, exactly. Phrenology. This idea that the shape of your skull told you things about your personality and your qualities. All of this stuff is just garbage pseudoscience, and there was a lot of it. All right. But most people thought that Punnett squares were. I'd like some Punnett squares. Are they tasty? Here's another thing. And so the bigger point number two, point number one, Nazis are bad. Point number two, the world was simpler, but people were still trying to understand it. They were just wrong a lot. Number three, there was an incredible emphasis on ethnic identity within Europe. In the late 1800s and all the way through the early 1900s, ethnic identities were very closely tied to nationalism. This is what's going to lead to the unification of Germany. Germany had never been one completely unified country until 1878, and the concept of ethnocentric nationalism is going to be really, really important. This is during the period of time where we still have big empires. We have the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we have the British Empire, the French Empire, the Ottoman Empire. There are lots of ethnic groups that don't have self-determination, that can't make rules and govern themselves. So this concept of ethnic identity and establishing an ethnic identity in history is important for these people, much more so than it is today in what we would call Western culture. Now, if you go to Europe today, there's still a lot of ethnic nationalism. I'm not trying to discredit any of the crazy stuff that goes on over in the European world or even in the American world or wherever your ethnocentric populist, well, we won't get into all of that. It's still a thing, but here's the thing. You have this unification of Germany, which is a really, really big thing that destabilizes Europe because Germany becomes a new national imperial power. You have this pressure to constantly expand the empire, and you need justifications for expanding the empire. So there's this idea that if we're better than these people that we're conquering, and we can justify that through science or history, that makes us better. And you need this grounding. You need this concept of establishing a justification for yourself. So that's sort of the big thing to remember. Now, once we get through World War I, we also need to remember how bad the Treaty of Versailles was. The Treaty of Versailles was the document that effectively wrapped up World War I, and it really put the screws to Germany. It made them dismantle their entire empire. It took big chunks of their territory inside Europe and gave it to other countries. They had to pay billions of dollars in reparations. Even back then, like back in the 1919, it was billions of dollars. And it utterly humiliated Germany. So for the interwar period between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II, the German economy was in the tank. The government was very unstable. There was a lot of violence going on. The people needed a victim to point at, and that just so happened to be something that a lot of the movements we're going to talk about was able to give them. So let's not forget how badly the Treaty of Versailles messed up Germany. And finally, point number 5, and this is sort of an umbrella thing. This period of time has a huge amount of change in it. If you're just looking at the late 1800s and the early 1900s, this is a radical different shift in the way that the world operated. You have the arrival of things like Darwinism, which shook scientific communities to their core. No pun intended there. You have the Industrial Revolution, which is probably the single biggest shift that happens culturally speaking that has ever happened in the human history. Well, maybe from hunter-gatherer nomads to living in sedentary life. But the Industrial Revolution was an enormously important period of time that dramatically shifted the way that people thought, the way that people worked, the way that countries operated, the growth of empires. I cannot impress to you how important the Industrial Revolution was. And finally, these big changes involve this movement called Orientalism. And this is something we talked about a little bit back when we were discussing the history of archaeology a few weeks ago. But Europe expands over into Asia, beginning in the early 1800s, especially by the time that you get to the 1830s and 40s. and then an expanding, much more rapid pace during this Industrial Revolution phase. The Industrial Revolution requires these countries in Europe to have natural resources and money. It just so happens that some of the biggest and richest deposits of natural resources are in both Africa and Asia. But when these people get to Asia, it is going to open their eyes to a lot of things that the European West had lost contact with. And there is a lot of ancient history in Asia that they had sort of not necessarily forgotten, but not really understood. And stuff from Asia becomes very much in vogue and very much a fad. Did World War I help to expose Europeans to other foreign cultures? That is mostly going to happen during the late 1800s industrialization period. And it actually starts a little bit earlier than that in the early 1800s, especially when places like China and Southeast Asia and India are first feeling the impacts of the second wave of imperialism. You get your Opium Wars over here between Britain and China in 1830s, and then the Britain-French alliance versus the Chinese dynasties in the 1850s. But you get lots of internal exploration of India and Central Asia during the 1840s and 50s. You start seeing a lot of this esoteric wisdom show up. You start seeing a lot of people getting really interested in Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism and Zoroastrianism, all these deep, very ancient religions. And that is going to play very, very heavily into the atmosphere that's going on at this period of time in Germany. So all of that is a bit of preface before we actually get to the main topic. Shane, when you're Reich, you're Reich. Well, David, I appreciate you recognizing that, man. And I'm trying to think of another German word pun, but I don't have any off the top of my head. So, welcome, David. How's it going? All right. So, where are we going to start? And I should note that the purpose of my discussion tonight is to sort of trace the line of a lot of what we recognize as Nazi back to its origins, and especially its origins in these really weird secret societies that had some really, really wonky concepts. I bet not thinking of another pun makes you furious. Oh, David. All right, so we're going to start with something called the Volkisch movement. And that was supposed to have a C. And I can't type because I can't talk and type at the same time. Movement. Volkisch movement. What does this mean? Well, the word Volkisch, if you know anything about Volkswagen, you'll know that means like the people's car, right? It's got the people in there. So Volkisch means the body of the people. The body of the people. So this particular movement is something that starts pretty early in the 1800s inside of Germany, and it builds slowly over time, but the ideology of this Volkisch movement is actually going to be sort of the bedrock of what becomes the Nazi Party. And the Volkisch movement is specifically German, and it is going to have a very idealized and somewhat romantic view of the history of the German people. So inside of this Volkisch movement, there are going to be moments in time where the common people inside of Germany in the 1800s are going to sort of look back to these glory days of the ancient German people. And one of the groups that they're going to look at is the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Empire was a country that was founded in 800 AD by a guy named Charlemagne, and it lasted all the way through until 1804, 1805, when Napoleon defeated them at the Battle of Austerlitz, and then came into Germany and sort of broke apart the Holy Roman Empire and set up this new thing that he called the German Confederation. But for 1,000 years, one of the most powerful countries inside of Europe was the Holy Roman Empire. And over time, the leaders of these Holy Roman Imperial countries, iterations during the past, are going to become folk heroes. So you're going to hear the stories about Heinrich I and Otto III and these big Holy Roman emperors that did amazing things. People like Frederick Barbarossa, who went off on crusade. This just reminded me about how Robin Williams once referred to the Swiss as the nice Germans. So Switzerland was at one point part of the Holy Roman Empire, as was much of Eastern Europe. The Holy Roman Empire was an enormous chunk of territory. And at its height, it sat basically all of this right here. It was huge. And this is what's going to be one of these cultural touchstones that the Volkish movement is going to latch onto. They're going to go, man, remember when Germany was just super powerful, when the German people all worked together, when we were the ones that were defending Europe against Ottoman expansion. This is during the period of time, mostly in the 1500s, where the Ottoman Empire was trying to invade and had successfully invaded much of the Balkan Peninsula and was trying to break into Central Europe. It was the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V that stopped them at the Siege of Vienna in 1529. So you have these moments of great European history, great moments in history, and it's all these German people, and they're like, yeah, that could be us again. And this is one of the things that really starts pushing Germany towards unification. Now, another one of these, the Gaul of those Romans. Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Gauls, because another one of these moments in history that these people latch onto are the pre-Christian Germanic pagans. People like the Gauls and the Franks, people that lived in the sort of general Central and Eastern Asian region during the reign of the Roman Empire. There had been a lot of dealings between the Roman people and a lot of these German people, these Germanic tribes, and there was a little bit of pride in the Volkish movement that one of the powers that brought down Rome were the Germans. And it wasn't necessarily that they, destroyed something beautiful. It was that they had conquered these big, powerful enemies, and they had set up for themselves these new kingdoms like the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne was a Frank. There you go. I know you go, well, Frank isn't the Franks the French? Yes, but also there's a lot of mixed heritage between a lot of these what we call Germanic tribes. So you see a lot of this interest in history. And part of this is because, again, in the early 1800s, there weren't really any hopes or dreams yet of a unified Germany. So Germany was in a weak position, and people were looking to the glory days, hoping to maybe get that back together. Now, as time progresses, and we get to the middle and later 1800s, especially once Germany unifies, this is going to change and start taking on a little bit of a different tone. And this is going to be tied directly to archaeological advances that are happening and discoveries being made by German archaeologists, including a guy named Heinrich Schliemann, who is the guy that basically proved that the city of Troy was real, the Mycenaeans were real people. He starts bringing back pieces of pottery from places like Turkey and Greece to Germany, and it plays into this Orientalism, this idea that there is hidden knowledge, that there's this thing that can be sought, this curtain that might be parted that you could see to the other side of and gain some sort of mystical or historical knowledge that has been lost through time. And this rides right along with the rise of archaeology as a discipline. But this fits really, really well inside of the Volkish movement because it gives these people an opportunity to anchor themselves backwards in history. And one of the groups of people that they are going to begin identifying themselves with are the Aryans. Now, let's be clear here. The Aryans were a group of people that we do call Indo-Europeans. However, there are Indo-Europeans all over the place. And the Aryans were originally a group that sort of hung out around this region right in here, which is called the Caspian Sea. And they're the ones that invade India and set up the caste system. But there are a lot of them that move over here into Europe and over here into what is today the country of Turkey, and then later down here into the Levantine region, what we would call today Israel and Lebanon and Jordan. So these Indo-European people are related indirectly to a lot of the people that lived in places like Germany. And because of the archaeological data, which was incomplete at the time, and it's still partially incomplete, we still don't know everything that there is to know about this, but because these people were looking for something to latch onto, again, Germany is brand new, they want to establish themselves as a big player, they already have this idea of sort of thinking of themselves as the underdog, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they used to be really big, and then they weren't so big, and then they got, together again, now they could be back. So they start finding stuff that they claim is Aryan, and they start trying to do a really big bunch of bad history, really bad archaeology, and all sorts of weird pseudoscience. And they're going to start saying, okay, so Aryans are basically white people, which is not accurate. If you were to go back in time and find an Aryan, an Indo-European person from over in this region, perhaps one of the ones that invaded India, they would have looked a lot more like somebody from Persia. Well, I guess today that would be Iran. Or from this region right here, perhaps the Armenians or the Georgians. They're not really tall, 6'4", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, square-shouldered, square-jawed individuals. However, that's what they roll with. This is a bad movement because the Aryans that they're claiming don't really exist in history. However, they did not know that. Nobody could necessarily disprove them at that point. So they're looking for it. They found some circumstantial evidence, and then they're just like, whole hog, full out, go for it. The irony that the Aryans weren't white. Yeah, there are a lot of people in the ancient world that weren't white. And a lot of people get claimed as white, but they weren't white. Nope. Not white. Honest question. Should they have known better? At that point in time, if we are specifically looking at the middle point of the 1800s to the maybe like the 1880s or 1890s, there was plausible deniability. There was a non-zero chance that they were wrong. There was enough gray area that they were able to weasel their way in. Now, by the time we get to the Nazis in the 1940s or the 1930s, a lot of this stuff has been conclusively myth-busted. But it doesn't matter by that point because they had created so much of an ideological system that they had wrapped themselves up in this, and it didn't matter if it came out wrong. At one point, there are some Nazi archaeologists that get questioned about some of their stuff, and they go, no, well, I mean, here's the thing about history. We said something yesterday, and they proved it wrong today, so why don't we just say whatever we want to now, and, it might turn out right. And Himmler was the same sort of way. Heinrich Himmler, one of the guys that ends up becoming one of the top dudes in the Nazi regime, said the same thing about science. Like, science is based on theory. So why can't we say what we believe, and maybe next day it'll be proved true. Just because we don't think that it's true, or because you don't think that it's true right now, doesn't mean that it won't be true later on. This is very much alternative facts world. So the question of should they have known better, initially they probably should have. By the time you get to the Nazis actually taking over, Hitler running the show, absolutely they should have known better. And they had been proven wrong on multiple occasions, and they just didn't give a crap. I literally just popped up, and you have been on for 33 minutes. Twitch! Maddie, welcome. Welcome on in. I hope that everything is well in your world. Feel free to join in the conversation as you desire. So were these beliefs restricted to the educated upper class, or were they more widespread in the populace? So here's the thing. The people that were looking for this was the entire population. So the educated, the middle class that existed, which was pretty small, and the majority of the people all sort of felt this nationalism, this nationalist urge to identify themselves, to have a root, to have a pathway that goes back through time that establishes their internal ideas of themselves. I want to feel powerful. I'm in a position of low levels of power, responsible, or not necessarily as a nation, but even in my day-to-day life. For the majority of the 1850s and 60s, Russia was really bad off, and Germany was really bad off, and these other nations like France and England were just running away with things. And it seemed like the people in Eastern Europe were being left behind a little bit. And you have these very rundown lives where you are, working in a factory all day. You don't have a lot to live for. Your world is very monotonous. And in your head, you want to be special. You want to be unique. You have that need to feel powerful or to have some level of agency in your world. So if you hear this guy talking, or if you happen to pick up a pamphlet or a newspaper, and there's this guy talking about how the German people are actually related through time to these Aryan people, these great warriors, these super important people of the past, that feeds something in your brain psychologically and sociologically that makes you feel better about themselves. So the people that are craving this level of information are really the Volk, the people. But the ones going out to sort of prove this are the ones that have the means to do so. The rich people, the educated people, the ones that are in positions of power and influence. There's a lot of the leadership of the common people in Germany that, they still have nobility at that time. So a lot of these people are really, really interested in this. And a lot of the earliest, sort of expeditions to discover these things are funded completely by rich people, and it's the rich people that are going out and doing the archaeology. So there is an interest in this across the board. Mean Girls on a national level. There we get pretty much. Yes, truthiness. Truthiness. So the Volkish movement itself, originally, when they adopt this concept of Aryans, they're going to start looking for other Aryan people. And they're going to look for Aryan people that have a good, long history that they can attach themselves to. So you start seeing people in India. You start seeing people in Turkey. You start seeing people in Germany. But you also see people up here in Scandinavia. And the Scandinavian people are going to be seen as Nordic, but Nordic gets counted in the sort of larger umbrella of Aryan. And the Nordic people have a really long history, and they have these great sagas of epic proportion that describe all these great feats of the past. So you have the Edda and the Kalevala, and you have all of these, the sagas of the great explorers and the great warriors. And the Nazis, well, they're not Nazis yet. A lot of the German people, especially these sort of quasi-educated people that are looking for cool cultures to hang around with, are like, hey man, those Nords got it going on. we should say that they're part of us. So they do. So you start seeing a lot of interest in old Viking culture, Danish pride. I see you, SEN. I see you. So you start seeing this accumulation of interesting, cool people that already have established histories, and they're being sort of drawn into this larger gravity of Germany. But where does it go really, really weird? And it starts going weird with a lady named Helena Blavatsky. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. That's a cultural appropriation on an international level, Vern. Very much so. And that's a very apt description of it. So, who is Helena? This is Viking Bluetooth. Yeah, exactly. So, this is Helena Blavatsky, or as she is known by her followers, HPB. And Madame Blavatsky, which is how she referred to herself most of the time, Madame being some quasi-spiritual thing, like, Madame Blavatsky tells your fortune. She was a fortune teller. She claimed that she was a medium. She claimed that she had mystical powers. But here's the deal. She was a Russian of some financial import, and she had traveled a little bit over in Asia. Did she write your cookie? Oh, no. I think she wrote a book about astral projection. She wrote a lot of books about some weird occulty kind of stuff. Now, she claimed that she had traveled all over Asia and had spent years in China and years in Tibet and years in India, and she had learned from the hidden masters. And what she had distilled from all of this knowledge was that, in fact, the majority of what we would call Western culture prior to the fall of Rome was essentially the same thing that people were talking about in India and Asia. In reality, she just watched a bunch of videos. You heard HPV. Yeah. There's a little bit of a joke there, I Am Batbird, about how quickly her ideas spread, but I don't want to disparage her as an individual. I don't know if she had sexually transmitted diseases or not. Anyway, her ideas were definitely infectious. How about that? And one of the things that Madame Blavatsky really starts pushing is this concept here that there was a synthesis that could be made between Greek philosophy, especially like Platonic philosophy, and Eastern philosophy. Right. And what she is going to do is start talking about all of these different ideas. And again, there was a big market for this because of this Orientalism fad that was moving around. Infectious, you say. Indeed. She tours all over Europe. She goes over to the United States. She gets all over doing speaking tours, doing book signings, all that sort of stuff. Not that kind of madam? No, not that kind of madam. But she starts talking about this concept of spiritual evolution. Where was she from? She's originally from Russia. A small city in over here in what would be Western Russia. But her ideas are in all of the big circles. So one of the things that she starts talking about is this Arianism idea. She's going to latch onto this concept that Arianism is a real thing. The Aryans were these real people. This is part of her idea of bridging Eastern and Western philosophy, that the roots of Greco-Roman philosophy and Eastern philosophy, that being Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism, that these ideas were actually the actual original Aryan philosophy. Are you even allowed to speak about Nazis on Twitch? Martest, we're going to see. and if I get banned for talking about them in a proper historical context, I guess that I'll go down swinging. But also, hello. I don't think it should be a problem. We've talked about some Nazi stuff before. I had an entire discussion on Jainism and shared a whole ton of pictures of swastikas and stuff when we were talking about Jainism. Nobody flagged me. Honestly, I think that if everybody in the room is cool about stuff and doesn't try to do something silly like turn me over to Twitch, I think we'll probably be okay. I understand that I'm a very small streamer, but I don't think that I'm on Twitch's radar at all. So here's the idea that Blavatsky is pushing here, that this original Aryan philosophy had through time been both tainted and had been stolen and hijacked. Also, fun fact that your boyfriend keeps bringing up in jest, 50% of women actually voted for Hitler. Ooh, wow. The only mention of Nazis in Twitch rules about their hateful conduct and harassment policy. Yeah, so I'm not really being hateful. I'm sort of hating on the Nazis, perhaps. Ban Shane McGinnis. Alas, I'm sure you probably won't be the first person that has tried that there, David. Anyway, so, and here's where we're going to start talking about some uncomfortable stuff, right? So Blavatsky says that the original Aryan philosophy was hijacked and was tainted and was somewhat undermined or what's the past tense of undermined? I guess undermined by the Semitic philosophy. And this is where you're going to start seeing some pretty open anti-Semitism. And she's going to say that there's this idea of spiritual evolution, that human beings were meant to be big and strong and powerful and tall. And it was the lesser races, including the Semites, that were interbreeding with these Aryan people to make them lesser. And she points at all of the historical references to giants. And she said that giants were the original Aryan people, these very tall, very broad and strapping individuals that had lots of power. And the fact that they had popped up over time means that there were pockets of cultures that had basically been able to weed out this negative or bad genetic material from their stock and had sort of recovered this physical pure power. And if you don't think that that sounds Nazi, I don't know what else sounds that way. But what she's literally saying here is that if it weren't for certain lesser races, human beings would be a lot better off. Those ancient people stole everything from the Aryans and we're taking it back. Pretty much. Meanwhile, she was probably 5'2". I don't know. I don't know how tall she was. That's an interesting question. So here's the thing. She goes on to found something, a group that's called the Theosophical Society. Theosophical Society. So the Thoughts About God group. So here is the symbol of her group. And you're like, what the devil is going on here? Well, it's all the symbols. So you've got the Om, which is, of course, important for Hinduism. You've got the swastika, which is a big deal in Jainism. You've got the Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail. You've got what she called the actual star, not necessarily the Star of David, because that had been hijacked and tainted by Semitic people. And then, of course, you have the Ankh here in the middle, which is the Egyptian symbol of life. Yes, it's all symbol salad. If she was 5'2" and she was mad at the lesser races for messing up her genetics to make her short. Right. You're spreading hate speech and talking about Nazis. What? Yes, it's everything. How to bring every religion at once. Pretty much. This is the frightening version of the coexist bumper sticker. Yeah, this is the original coexist. Yes, the ohm symbol is everywhere. Like, it's all of the symbols put together. Because, again, what she was doing was bringing all of this knowledge together. Remember, all of the true knowledge is connected. And she was the one that had brought it all together. And she was the one that could tell everybody how to get there. And you're like, what the devil does that do? Well, here's what it does. Inside of Germany, her Theosophical Society, I don't know if it's necessarily propaganda because it's not for a government cause, but teachings, we'll use teachings with finger quotes, get picked up by the Volkish movement. There are already people inside the Volkish movement that are really looking for something like this. And Blavatsky's teachings are like fuel for a fire, and they get really excited about this. And you start seeing some very early German secret societies being set up that are going to kind of adopt this Volkish movement interpretation of things like Blavatsky. And one of the earliest ones is called the Reichshammerbund. And I'll type this out, but Reichshammerbund. How does that lead to killing all of the Jewish people? We're getting there. It's like the guy in the Indiana Jones movie. He had all the religious symbols just in case, right? Like, he's pulling out all the necklaces. Is that in the Indiana Jones movie or is that in the Mummy movie? I thought. Or now that I'm thinking weird. Yeah, it was from the Mummy. Okay, there we go. Okay. So Reichshammerbund, the hammer of the government club, basically. The German ruling hammer club. The Reichshammerbund is one of the earliest German secret societies. It was pretty small. It only had a few hundred members, maybe 1,000 members. But they're going to take a lot of these Volkish ideas, especially the ideas of racial ideology, and they're going to merge that with theosophical ideas to create racial purity. Not only are the German people separate, but we being the German people, and I'm not German, so like they would be saying we could get back to being that level if we could get rid of the non-German blood and the non-Aryan blood in our population. They're going to adopt the swastika as their symbol, and they are going to be openly and unabashedly anti-Semite. They're going to say that the Jewish people that live inside of Germany are the Semitic people that had ruined the heritage of the German people. They're going to point back at a long list of very bad interpretations of history and archaeology. They're going to have a lot of just really horrible concepts, and they're just going to roll with it. I just thought they wanted the right cummerbund for the tuxes they were planning on wearing. Reichshammerbund. There's going to be another one though that is substantially more successful, and it's called the Germanenorden, or the Order of Germans. Now, they are actually set up very much like the Freemasons. There are induction ceremonies. There are secret little like symbols and handshakes and things. And one of the central ideas of the Germanenorden was that they, inside Germany, were going to act as a counterpole to the secret Jewish organizations that were trying to take over the world. So there was this big concept of, and you know what it is, you've probably heard it all before, the secret Jewish cabal to take over the entire world. And it was all wrapped up in the banking system and Jewish nobility and yada, yada, yada. So that secret Jewish cabal was set up over there. So the German people, who were racially pure, needed to set up their own secret university / government / view of the world / club that are going to be able to combat that secret side. So this is like Hydra versus Shield stuff. You've got a secret society that's evil, and I'm going to set up my secret society that's good, and we're going to go out and fight the bad guys. They are going to be some of the first, or one of the first groups that forces you to prove your Arianism to join. So you have to prove that you have no non-German blood. You have to prove that you are not Semitic and not black, or not colored as they called it. And you had to prove that your wife was not Semitic or black or colored, because they don't want you having any babies that have this bad blood in them. And I know that this is starting to sound a horrible mess, and it is a horrible mess. Hey, Bubba, how's it going? Hail Hydra. Alas, but so true. So their symbol was this guy. This is the swastika with a cross overimposed on it. This is the symbol of the Germanen Orden. And this is on the cover of a book. This is by a guy named Gerhard Hahn. The name of the book here is The Cross of Christ and the Hooked Cross. And this particular book was basically done to justify Nazi teachings with with Christian philosophy. We should send DNA testing back in time. Vern, you would ruin a lot of these people's lives. Or maybe make them better, but you would depopulate a lot of these groups because, again, they don't have the DNA testing that we have right now. They don't know that they're probably more non-German than they think that they are. Yeah, just borrowed whatever symbol they want. Like, okay, we're going to put a cross because we're German Christians, and we're going to put the swastika behind it because we can do that, and great. Yeah, so you can already see where some of this Nazi ideology is coming from. So the Germanen Orden is actually fairly successful and has chapters across Germany and a pretty high amount of membership. But now we're going to start getting into some people that are going to be really big influencers. Because by the time you get to the very late 1800s and the early 1900s, you're going to start seeing leaders that are coming out in this field. And one of the first ones is a guy named Guido von List. Guido von List, and he is this guy. He was an Austrian. He was originally a writer. He was a sort of a fascinated individual. He was constantly reading stuff, and he had read a lot of the writings of Blavatsky and had joined into and been very influenced by the Theosophical Society. And this guy is going to be one of the real big, like, stone rollers. He starts getting a lot of this stuff going. That is a very mixed sounding name. Well, he was an Austrian and he could prove it, had the background, but he is going to leave his... Did Guido have any descendants on the Jersey Shore? I don't know if I should laugh at that. He's going to leave Christianity. And he is going to convert to Wodenism. And if you go, well, that sounds like Odin. It is. He is going to convert back to old German paganism. Because remember, one of the things that was really sort of one of these grasping moments back in the Volkish movement was this idea that the Germans used to be super powerful way back in the day when they were pagan. Did he try to be an artist too? I don't know if he ever tried to paint or draw. I know that he wrote a lot of stuff. But he is going to have this really big backlash against a lot of the changes that were going on in Germany. He didn't really like the Industrial Revolution. He thought that capitalism was pretty bad. He wanted people inside of Germany to go back to being a sort of bartering society on a small community level. He didn't like the rapid change that had happened in his lifetime. By the way, he was born in 1848. He's going to die in 1919. And he's going to convert himself back to his interpretation of the old Germanic gods, Odin, and this is going to pull very, very heavily from the Nordic list of gods because their pantheon had been very clearly defined. So, Freya and Thor and Odin. Nobody liked the Industrial Revolution. Hey, Akiv, how's it going, man? Failed Austrians are all the same. Well, I mean, he was pretty successful, so I don't think he's necessarily a failed Austrian. But one of the things that he's going to do that catches on a lot inside of these secret orders is that he is going to bring back numerology and he is going to bring back runes. And if you've ever seen runes, you know what I'm talking about. So this is von List's organization of what he called the good Aryan runes. No one expects the Industrial Revolution. So, now, I know what some people are thinking. Some people are thinking, wait, early 1900s, interests in runes, interest in Nordic, Nordic culture and philosophy and mythology. Is this guy Tolkien? Well, I'll tell you what. If you look in the back of Return of the King, there is a rune chart where Tolkien writes out the runes of the dwarves. Now, am I saying Tolkien was a Nazi? No. Tolkien hated the Nazis, thought that they were horrible, horrible people, but this stuff was popular. It didn't just happen overnight. This was culturally a big deal. There were really, really educated people that were getting involved in this stuff. It wasn't just one dude that was really excited about some runes and published them in his newspaper. No, this sort of stuff was growing and it was becoming part of the cultural milieu. I should have said zeitgeist and used the German word for it, but you know what I'm saying. So one of the things that von List was going to go on to do is that he was of course a visionary, right? Anybody that has this esoteric knowledge is going to be a visionary. It was the meme of its time. It really was. It really, really was. And this guy was one of the big pushers of the revival of runic popularism inside of Europe at the time. So he starts having these dreams and he starts seeing these visions. And inside of these dreams and visions, he's going to have these glimpses of what he calls scientific and historical truth. And he starts appropriating this concept of an apocalyptic millennialist view. I'm late. I missed everything but the dreams and visions. Great. Oh no, Figment. We started an hour early. So you've missed a bit, but we are currently talking about Guido von List, and we are right about the point where we switch over from 1800s to 1900s. So there is this really big millennialism thing going on, just like there was at the end of the last millennium. If you were alive in 1999 and you were around, you knew what I'm talking about. There's these people that are like, the world's going to end in 2012. The world's going to end in 2000. Everything's going to crash, Y2K. You know that stuff. Same thing happened at the end of 1800s. And von List is going to take on this really, really apocalyptic view, but with any good apocalypse, everybody knows that you have to have a messiah. This is going to be a night of face palming. Yes, Fid, it is. It's a whole night full of face palming. And List is going to say that society was going to be destroyed. There was going to be this giant apocalypse. There's going to be this humongous catastrophic event that was going to wipe out most of civilization. It was going to bring the global level of industrialization back down to pre-industrial levels. Oh no, were all the Germans buying all the toilet paper and all the gas? Right? Nobody likes nice round numbers. Everyone thinks the world's... Yeah, right? Nobody likes oh. That's just crazy. Not even computers like it. Ragnarok. There was a little bit of the Ragnarok in there. He didn't necessarily call it Ragnarok, but there's this idea that the world was going to be reduced back down to a simpler society, the way that it was prior to the Industrial Revolution. And the person that was going to rebuild society was going to be this Aryan warrior. Did he predict TikTok? No. That may be too much. Can we have a tiny apocalypse? Smaller apocalypse. The world's not going to go away and humans aren't going to get wiped out, but there's going to be a societal leveling, if you will. And the guy that is going to save the German people is going to be the reincarnated version of this ancient Aryan warrior. And he doesn't have a name, well, in some versions he has a name, but it doesn't really matter. There's going to be this one figure. And this one figure is going to lead the Aryan people out of this apocalyptic view. And this one Aryan reincarnated warrior figure is going to establish basically utopia on Earth and restore all of the proper levels of races. This is kind of like an Aragorn, but he uses a particular title. And he says that the person that is going to do this is the Fuhrer. And Guido von List talks and writes about the Fuhrer all the time. This person that's going to lead us out of the dark. This person that is going to reestablish Aryan superiority on Earth. And Guido von List is super popular, so much so that there are people that form a society around him called the List Society. And these people are going to take List's ideas, they're going to throw them right in there with the Volkish concepts. And when World War I breaks out, these people really think this is it. Like they go, okay, this is it. This is it. This is it. I'm convinced we all missed the Messiah, and now this is Elon Musk's Matrix. Oh, man. Loki's on the way. Odin and Thor come out to play down at Ragnarok. Down at Ragnarok. Oh, Bubba. You made me think about Fraggles, man. That's nostalgia taking me back. I appreciate that. If the title isn't Strider, you don't want it. Nope. It will take him 40 days and 40 nights. Yep, the Fuhrer. So, here's the thing. When Germany starts losing World War I, and in fact, when Germany loses World War I, a lot of people look at Guido von List and go, dude, you were wrong. And he dies in 1919. Now, did he die because he was old? Yeah, probably. But did he die because his messianic apocalyptic view of the world had collapsed and Germany was now the humiliating, receiver of humiliation from the Treaty of Versailles? Maybe. Maybe so. But he's not the only person. Lenz von Liebenfels, sorry. Who is this guy? All right. Well, we're getting there. He is this guy. Now, you'll see him here wearing a habit because he actually spent a lot of his young life as a monk. Now, he actually does get kicked out of being... he gets kicked out of the order because he has weird carnal desires. Yeah, the one thing prophets who foretold the end of the world in their lifetimes were all wrong. Yeah. So, Lenz von Liebenfels. Well, yeah, for carnal desires. You can already tell that this guy probably has some issues, and he does. Well, so here's the deal. Lanz von Lebenfels is going to be, he's an Austrian. Again, he is, a writer. Hey, Grathar, welcome. Hope you're having a good one. Are we kink shaming? Well, the monks were kink shaming. I'm just reporting what they said. I was not there to witness said carnal acts, and I cannot rightfully give an opinion on whether or not they were wrong, just against the order of his monastic rule. So, there we are. I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for asking. Chili con carnal desire. So, Lanz von Liebenfels, I keep saying Liebenfels, it's Liebenfels. He is a Volkish movement leader. He had been involved in some of these earlier groups, had been in some secret societies. He was a member, in fact, a founding member of the List Society, by, basically wrapping around Guido von List's ideas. But after the collapse of that, Liebenfels is going to be looking for the angle because, well, List is dead now, and we need somebody new to be kind of like the center of the weird underground culty kind of thing. This is going to be him. And he is going to begin circulating a newspaper, and that newspaper is called Ostara. And you can see a cover of one of the issues here. This is an issue from 1931. And you can see here his name, copyright by J. Lanz de Lebenfels. So, Ostara. And Ostara is going to pick up a lot of reads, and it's going to be circulated pretty high. It is openly anti-Semitic. It is very big on the pseudoscience, and it has a lot of those weird quasi-religious concepts, especially lots of Eastern and Western philosophical blending going on. Interesting point here is that we know that Hitler, as a young man, read issues of the Ostara magazine. Sounds very Ishtarish. There's some of that stuff thrown in there. That's a little bit more on the Mithraism side and a little bit more on the Sumerian side. That had not necessarily been as popularized because they were, at that point, not completely able to read a lot of the Sumerian and Akkadian myths. So that stuff was about to blow up pretty quickly around this time, but not completely around there. But Ishtar, of course, has life outside of the Sumerian region and had been picked up as a sort of a cult goddess all over the sort of Central Asian region. But Lanz von Lebenfels is going to... now, this is a claim, and I'm reporting this as a claim. We don't have any proof of this. At one point, Liebenfels is going to say that at one point, Hitler loved his magazine so much that he actually tracked Lanz down and asked for back issues of Ostara that Hitler had missed. Now, do we know that that's accurate? We don't know. Liebenfels is a bit of a loon already, so he could have just been lying to try to make himself more popular. But he's got lots of really wonky ideas. First off, let's talk about his weird, wonky racial ideas. So first off, he has this concept that the first humans, Adam and Eve, according to him, Eve was made racially and pure, was an Aryan. However, at some point in her life, she had been seduced by demons. And this is a little bit playing off of the Lilith myth, which existed at the time. But the idea here is that the lesser races of mankind come from this union between Aryans and demons, or monsters, however you want to call them. And this plays, of course, into the Theosophical Society kind of garbage. There was this idea that he promoted that women, especially blonde women, were somehow more sexually attracted to men that had darker skin. And he promoted this idea that people that had darker skin, especially Semitic people, were hypersexual. This sounds a lot like a lot of the things that was used in the United States as racist ideology against African American people, because it's the same ideology. And Liebenfels actually promoted castration, and said basically that if you weren't an Aryan, you should be castrated. He never spoke to a woman in his life, did he? Well, let's remember that he started off life as a monk. So he spent lots of his good dating years in a monastery. He said that the German race, the Aryan race, were a word that he used. Ooh, that was in the wrong spot. I'm supposed to be typing over here. Word Gottmenschen. This is a German word for God-men. And I know earlier on someone mentioned Wolfenstein, the video game, but this is the basis of the concept that there were supermen that could be recreated. That if the bad blood could be filtered out, that the German Aryan race, if it were made pure, would go back to being God-men, that they would be super soldiers. Also, reality is just in the way when coming up with that weird stuff, so you can just throw that out. Yeah, no reality. No, who needs reality? Don't worry about this stuff. So, Liebenfels starts encouraging people to do genealogy and to keep these big genealogical charts of themselves. And he actually creates a system, a point-based system, where you would go through your history and your physical appearance, and based on certain appearances, you would get lots of points or fewer points. And for you to be a good Aryan, you had to have a certain range of points. And if you had in this middle range, you were questionable. And if you had more than a certain number of these qualities, you were just not a god man. You're just bad. And I don't know if you all have ever seen the charts that were part of the Nuremberg laws that the Nazis passed before World War II, but this is basically the same thing. Some of the instructions that were given to Nazis to pick out Jewish people from the average person were these lists of physical features. This is where this stuff comes from. 3 points to Gryffindor. Ooh. As you go on, the situation becomes more and more hilarious and so sad. Right. The Bible kind of says the opposite. The Nephilim were on earth in those days. Oh, yeah, so you're talking about the Nephilim. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's talk about Nephilim, too. There's a lot of the weird Kabbalistic there's a lot of weird interpretation of Jewish mysticism and Kabbalistic mysticism, but what these people are trying to do is look at this Jewish documentation and try to find ways where the Jewish people were lying, right? So that the idea was that Jewish scripture maintained some of the truth, you just had to filter out what it was, because these Semitic people, finger quote, had ruined all of this stuff, finger quote. It's really weird. Probably in the higher range. That sounds horrific to me. The awesome people were born of angelic beings. Well, there's the thing. So he encourages genealogy. He's all about this ranking of points and hierarchical stuff. He's also going to promote the swastika. That's one of his big symbols. And he's going to be really interested on this period of time where there were these Teutonic Crusaders. So the period of time where the Germans went off on crusade, this was going to be a big deal for him. And to a certain extent, he called members of his group the Teutonic Knights. This idea that the people from Europe, especially these Germans, were going to go to foreign places and run out the evil and replace it with the true goodness that was. So this is sort of this warped view of the Crusades, where Christianity went back over to Jerusalem and the Holy Land region and took over a lot of that area. It's this, but you see, this is part of that idea of reaching back in time and trying to find something to latch onto and then using that to justify yourself, right? Same sort of idea. Knowing what the Bible describes, some angels I have concern for what is mixed angelic human could be. Lots of eyes and wings, not so much body. Right. All right. Did I show all of my pictures? Yes. Okay, so moving on to a guy. By the way, Liebenfels lives from 1874 to 1954. It's all just so bizarre. Right. It's really weird. It really, really is. And it gets weirder. If it can make any sense that it get weirder, it gets weirder. Hans Horbiger. He lived from 1860 to 1931. It's like televangelism, but without television. Oh, yeah. So Hans Horbiger, he was an Austrian. He was an industrialist, though. He built things and he designed things, and he had... I'm fairly certain that he had some patents in his name. So an industrialist guy. But he's going to start having some dreams and visions. Again, dreams and visions. It's all in the dreams and visions. And he's going to basically turn pseudoscientist. And he has this... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be showing you who he is. This guy has... such gosh, the facial hair here is just like powerful mustache, man. That is a powerful mustache. When you got the curl and it's just natural, man, that guy. He was a pretty strapping dude, pretty sizable physically, and used that a lot when he spoke to sort of, impart this certain amount of justification and legitimacy to his discussions. But he comes up with one of the weirdest ideas that catches on. The world ice theory, and we'll just go ahead and we'll call it doctrine, because it's actually what he calls a doctrine. That's majestic. World ice doctrine. So here's the story. Apparently, one night, he's out looking at the moon. And he goes, "The moon's made of ice. It's white. It's reflective. It's made of ice." Okay, except, is it? No, we know that it's not. Definitely ice. But then he starts this weird fascination with ice. And especially the interaction of what happens when you mix ice and fire together. He doesn't write a song of ice and fire. Just talks about it a lot. Did he freeze anyone? What year is this again? So he was born in 1860 and he died in 1931. The world ice doctrine is going to get really, really popular right around the end of World War I period. Wait, the moon's not made of cheese? No, not made of cheese. If the moon was made out of ribs, would you eat it? I would. There are a few people today that think the world is flat, so a moon made out of ice isn't that far-fetched. I mean, the beard is almost as good as G.R.R. Martin's. You're going to assume so. Did it freeze for anyone else? Oh, I don't see it freezing, and I do see one point where I dropped a few frames, so it might have just blipped a little bit for you, Figment. Yeah, so the big beard, all the majestic facial hair, and crazy pseudoscientific hypothetical theories. Okay, so he has this idea, and he works on this idea and comes up with this idea that the universe was actually created from the collision of two stars. And one of them was a star that was fire, and one of them was a star that was basically ice. And they crashed together, and because of the big difference in temperature, it exploded, and basically everything else comes from that. Yeah, and this is why the moon is covered with ice, because there's all this ice flying around, and there's this, all the comets are ice. When it hails on Earth, this is actually because a comet has hit the atmosphere and broken up into little pieces of ice. So hail is actually cosmological ice falling to Earth. Because we can just make up science now. That's not how it works, beard sir. Okay, you might have great facial hair, but let's explain science to you. Let me in, you're going to mess up everything. This is going all poetic Edda, but without Ymir. There's the Edda. You're right. There's the ice that comes from that stuff. When it's all layered into that junk like a giant lasagna of crazy. And the layers of the Earth, right? So at this time in the early 1900s and late 1800s, we're doing geology. And geology as a field is becoming independent as a science. And people are looking at all these different layers. Like, look, we can go dig up places, or you can go look at certain areas of the crust, and there are layers. And Horbiger goes, oh, yeah, that's because lots of moons have fallen. Earth used to have tons of moons, like lots of moons. And they all just kept crashing into the Earth. And the Earth basically just absorbed them, and that's where all the levels come from. Yeah. They did find ice on the moon, so I think the science is sound. When a fire star and a ice star really love each other, it's like there's better when there are 5 elements. That's no moon. The big floods, all of the great floods that have been recorded in human history were from ice moons that melted in the atmosphere and flooded the Earth. And this includes the big flood, wait for it, this includes the big flood that wiped out Atlantis. Because, oh yeah, Atlantis was a real place. And it was where the original humans lived. It was where the original Hyperborean, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We'll talk about Hyperborea more in a minute. Anyway, what you think of as Atlantis was actually not an island. It was way up at the North Pole. It was in this area that was completely surrounded by giant cliffs. That's why we haven't found it yet. Because this is where these people lived, and they were perfect, and they had all this advanced science and knowledge, but then this ice moon fell, and it flooded the world, and they had to interbreed with the lesser races. It's just so crazy. It's just so crazy. All of those moon floods explain Sailor Moon. There we go. I thought you were going to say Noah's Ark. Atlantis is worse somehow. Oh, no. The flood, the Great Flood, the flood of Noah, that was an ice moon too. All that technology and no one could build a boat. It was a big flood. Now you know Shane's Atlantis theory. No, my Atlantis theory. Oh, okay. So here's one little nugget of the Atlantis theory. It does involve a cosmological impact. So there's one little nugget, but it is not the world ice doctrine, by the way. So now that I've told you all of the crazy things that this guy believed in, now let me tell you that this became massively popular and immediately adopted in a lot of the Volkish circles. A lot of the secret society movements really liked this idea, and in fact, they're going to use this guy, Hans Horbiger, as a foil, because one of the things we talked about earlier were these theories that they had come up with that didn't necessarily completely have the evidence to disprove them. By the time we get to the 1920s, a lot of that Volkish ideology had been utterly disproven. But here comes Hans Hornberger that's like, oh, no, 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 no. Basically, all of science right now, it's garbage. The whole thing is garbage. And there is a massive anti-intellectual backlash inside of Germany. Let's remind ourselves, though, this is also in the middle of the post-World War I German order, when the leadership had utterly failed Germany, how the people, the everyday common people inside of Germany were experiencing the worst economic conditions that Germany had ever seen. This was an incredibly bad time where anybody that was viewed to be higher or more educated or especially rich was already suspect as it was. They didn't like these people because they were the ones that were trying to make the Weimar Republic work. They were the ones that had signed the Treaty of Versailles. They were the ones that had caused Germany all this trouble. So here comes this guy saying, oh yeah, all those leaders, all those intellectuals, all those people that have gone to university, they're just all full of crap. And I'm the one that's teaching you the truth. And this is picked up like wildfire. One of the biggest believers in World Ice Doctrine, wait for it, Adolf Hitler, was a big supporter of the World Ice Doctrine. So much so that he promoted it once he became the leader of Germany, using Nazi money and support and power. So, yeah. This is not a small-scale idea. This is something that really caught on a lot of places. Moving along, because there's so much more. Rudolf von Sabotendorf. And you're like, that's a great name. He's not a very good guy, though. he's the bit of a not good guy. Here we go. Here's old Rudy. His name, by the way, is not actually Rudolf von Sabotendorf. He called himself that and started using it, and everybody just started picking it up. Rudolf von Sabotendorf. Yep. And I just erased occultism off of the list here, and I need to back that up. Nope, I just rolled it. Why did I scroll down? Whoop, there we go. Haha. Rudolf von Sabotendorf. What's up with this guy? Well, he's another one of these people. He was part of... But wait, there's more. He was part of the Germanenorden, but he was a German, but he had been raised in Turkey. And this is going to be an interesting thing for him because there were at that time, and there still are today, by the way, for those of you that are maybe not up on all the esoteric secret societies, there are a lot of different versions of Freemasonry. And in Turkey, Sabotendorf is going to be inducted into the Turkish version of Freemasonry. And he's going to say that this was the real version of Freemasonry and that the stuff that was going on in Europe was the tainted version that had been taken over by the Semitic people. Not to mention the fact that a lot of the people that are living inside Turkey are Semitic in heritage, but we don't point out the obvious issues because obvious issues are obvious, right? So he's also going to convert to mystical Islam. There's a particular branch of Islam called Sufi. This is a very... So like if you know about the whirling dervishes of Islam, a lot of those people are in the Sufi tradition. This is a very sort of mystical tradition inside of Islam. So he's going to convert to that, saying that it had, again, the deep knowledge, the old knowledge. So when he moves back to Germany, he's going to join the Germanenorden, the order of the Germans that I mentioned earlier. And he's very quickly going to move to the top. He's going to be the minister or the master of his local group for quite some time. And he is going to start taking them in a different direction. And he is going to bring with him a lot more firepower. And it will not be long before the Germanenorden gets changed into something called the Thule Society. Ginsu knives. Nope, not Ginsu knives. But this brings us to the pun tonight. Everybody wants to Thule the world. And yeah, there's lots of tears and there's lots of fears. But the Thule Society, Yeah. So this gets founded in 1918, but it doesn't really catch on. Car Top Cargo Box Company. This doesn't necessarily catch on very well until the 1920s, but the Thule Society is going to probably be the most important group that a lot of people that study or that talk about World War II don't talk about. This is one of the front runners of the Nazi Party, and I mean that very, very directly. So what's up with the Thule the Thule Society? So first off, if you want to be a member, there are a lot of requirements. Ready for it? Okay. So first off, can we see your T-shirt? There are no Easter eggs on the T-shirt tonight. I'm wearing a blue one, and it just says Crown and Ivy, which I guess you can probably work something out of, but it's just blue. So membership requirements. If you want to join the Thule Society, you have to be of Aryan blood 3 generations back, going all the way back to before 1800. And you have to be Aryan going all the way back, and so does your wife. And once you apply for membership, you then have to go through a really long questionnaire. And it asks you a lot of really, really weird questions like, does this particular body part have a lot of hair on it? How big is your nose? Do you have a unibrow? That kind of stuff. Lots of these really invasive personal questions, because this was designed at basically him trying to weed out people that weren't really Aryan. Lots of finger quotes being used here. I'm happy you don't partake in the occult. No, no, not my cult. I'm a big fan of facts. You had to include a photo, a recent photograph of yourself, and in some cases, if there were questions about your candidacy, you had to send in a footprint. Like you had to get a piece of paper and rub ink on the bottom of your foot and send in your footprint, because Sabatendorf was convinced that based on your footprint, you could tell how much ape you had in you. Now, that sounds pretty honkin' racist, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's just to get in the door. Once you get in the door, then you start learning all of the weird stuff. And you're like, that wasn't the weird stuff? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, the weird stuff. So first off, what is Thule? Yeah. In some ancient texts, especially Greek and a couple of Roman texts, there are mentions of this place called Ultima Thule, or the furthest out island. And some historians interpret this to be a reference to Scandinavia, but Sabatendorf and the Thule Society are going to say, oh, no. This is an island that is way up here, even north of Greenland, up here. And Thule was the capital city of a country. No, Thule. Zul's cousin who had a lisp. Aw, that's horrible. Thule, yeah, I got you. Trans-Neptunian objects located on the Kuiper Belt. Yeah, so there was this ancient country called Hyperborea. And it was this golden age of humanity. It was a utopian society. It was all the way up in the north in the ice. By the way, this goes hand in hand with world ice doctrine. And the people that lived in Thule, the people that lived in Hyperborea, were the purest of the pure races. They were the god men. And the Thule Society inside of Germany was going to bring back the race of god men. They were going to purify the races. They were going to clean out all of the stuff. They were going to bring back the God-men. And they were saying that they would be the capital and that they would be the leaders and that they would be at the front of all of this stuff. Yeah. So Hyperborea. Now, Hyperborea was a neat card game. Hey, Junk, welcome. Ultima Thule sounds like a game from Lord. We're going to play Ultima Thule today. If you've read any of the Hellboy stuff, the Hyperboreans get brought up there, as well as Vril.
Friends,
Romans,
countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
Riot Andromeda, thank you so much for that, host. And welcome in. Please feel free to make yourself at home. So, yeah. There's this whole concept of this native power called Vril, V-R-I-L, that was the sort of super energy that made super powered individuals work. Yeah, it's a big thing. Themyscira must have been in the neighboring island. Not the Amazons. The Amazons are Scythians. We all know that the Amazons are Scythians. But Sabotendorf is going to adopt a particularly well-known image as the symbol of his group. And here we go. So this is the symbol of the Thule Society. And if you're like, that's starting to look like a Nazi swastika. Well, yeah, it really is. Because that's where we're headed. If you don't see the lines that I'm lying down, this is where we're headed. Another thing. Let's look at this guy. Volkischer Beobachter. This was the official newspaper of the Thule Society. Don't believe the hype. But race of warrior women, island of super dudes, smells like a Netflix series you don't want to watch. Yeah. If it's on Netflix, it probably won't have too much nudity, though. If it was on HBO, yeah, just skip through all that stuff. So the Volkischer Beobachter, the observer of the Volkish, and he is invoking this right away. And I said that we didn't have a picture of Hitler, but here we go. Here's a picture of Hitler and the Volkish observer. Grift Massen Nachmen Hitler takes measurements in the government, is what this says. I can't really read all the rest of that stuff. Anyway, this becomes their thing. And they use this to promote their ideology. And what's really funny is that the paper itself, when they first buy it, was a sports newspaper. And it was basically talking about soccer. And they figured, like, hey, the common person likes sports, and the common people are the ones that are suffering, and the common people are the ones that are in the Volkish movement anyway. So we can sneak some anti-Semitic propaganda in there and no one will notice because these are the anti-Semitic people already. There you go. Yeah, so originally this was the newspaper owned by the Thule Society, and Sabotendorf wrote a lot of it and did a lot of the editing. They're eventually going to sell the paper, the Volkisch Observer, to a political party. And that political party is called the Nazio-Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. The Nazi Party. That's right, the Thule Society sells its newspaper to the Nazi Party. And then after a few years, as the viewership to this magazine and the subscriber base grows, guess what? One of the Nazis decides to buy it for himself. That's right, Hitler. He buys that newspaper. He owns it, and he distributes it. So I noticed that Hitler in the photo is sporting the swastika on his arm. At this point, has the swastika become official symbol of the Nazi Party? The Nazi Party doesn't exist at this point. The Thule Society is set up in 1918. The Nazi Party, as we know it, doesn't really get established until a few years after that. So that newspaper that I showed you, the headline, the Volkisch Observer, that particular issue came out, I think, in 1934. It was just one of the only ones that I could find a picture of. I wanted to actually show you a picture of the newspaper. Because the long version is harder to say. Yeah, nobody wants to say Nazi Sozialistische Arbeiterpartei like 17 times in a lecture. So you just take the first two syllables of Nazio, which means national. It's National Socialist German Workers' Party. So he didn't just want to change out shirts. No. So there's this Thule Society. And this, by the way, is getting really popular. By the way, the Volkisch Observer, by the time you get to the end of World War II, is selling 1.7 million issues per run. Which is crazy in the middle of wartime Germany to be selling that many issues. But we're getting closer to the point that the Nazis are going to be a Nazi thing. Gesundheit. So, are there maybe members of the Nazi Party that were members of the Thule Society? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the answer to that is yeah, and some pretty big ones. Like this guy. This is probably a Nazi that a lot of people don't really know very much about. His name is Hans Frank, or Hans Frank. Frank was Hitler's lawyer. He was also one of the first members of Hitler's cabinet. And when Nazi Germany took over Poland, this guy gets put as the governor of Poland. And you go, okay, well, why is that a particular thing? Why would he have been chosen? Well, let us remember that of the Nazi death camps from World War II, the big ones, like Auschwitz and Birkenau, those were in Poland. And Hans Frank oversaw those. Now, I know a lot of people are like, but what about the SS? I thought the SS ran the camps. Yeah, but this guy ran the infrastructure that made the camps work. So if you wanted to know where the Jews getting killed comes in, the Thule Society membership hates Jewish people. And there are people real high up there that gets involved with this stuff. But he's not the only one. Let's go to our next individual. This guy. This guy is Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess was Hitler's personal secretary. If you are familiar with the book Mein Kampf that Hitler wrote while he was in prison, Rudolf Hess probably actually wrote a lot of that from dictation that Hitler was giving, because they were in the same jail cell together. Rudolf Hess was literally Hitler's right-hand man. And when the Nazi Party took over, this guy is effectively going to be second in command of the Nazi Party. He is going to be a real big believer in the Thule Society stuff. His right-hand man, father came, Polish Jew, father came in 1957, converted to Judaism when he met my mom. He looks like he plucked his unibrow. You're not supposed to talk about the unibrow, Vern. Don't mention the unibrow. Are there maybe other members that were in the Thule Society? Well, it turns out, yes, there were. How about this guy? This guy's name is Karl Harter. And a lot of people probably don't know who this guy is. But here we will start talking about how the Thule Society became political. There were some political rabble-rousing events going on in the interwar period, especially in the early interwar period between World War I and World War II. And the majority of the people that sort of took part in a lot of this stuff were average, everyday people. It sounds like it's all about who you know. It really is about who you know. So, a lot of these problems and a lot of these issues that had been stirring and spilling and, oh, dude, we're getting to the SS. We'll get there, I promise. A lot of the problems that had been going on were targeting specific members of the German government. The reason Hitler went to jail is because he was trying to kidnap the governor of the state of Bavaria. There were a lot of marches and attempted assassination attempts, especially against basically anybody that had Jewish heritage that was in a position of government. And it just so happens that the Thule Society had tons and tons of everyday working class members that would love to, exercise a little bit of their anger. And people like Karl Harrer are going to be instrumental in transitioning the body of the Thule Society into a political group. And Karl Harrer is the first head of the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the DAP. This is the front runner of the NSDAP. The DAP became a very popular political party at that point. The ranks began to swell, and as it turns out, there are a lot of people that really found what they were looking for in a lot of these weird Thule Society ideas. Now, Harrer and Hitler didn't see very eye to eye, and once Hitler, who joined the DAP, and joined right along with a lot of this weird ideology, Hitler became very, very instrumental in the DAP, went on to take over the DAP. And at that point, he changed the name of it and took it away from being a secret society, and then it became the Nazi Party. So the Nazi Party itself, or the NSDAP, Nazi-Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, is going to be forged out of the ranks of this really weird, Volkish, quasi-spiritual, quasi-pseudoscientific mess. And the original stormtroopers, the Sturmabteilung, the SA, Hitler's original goon squad, most of those people are going to be these sorts of individuals, these people that were willing to go out and crack skulls, because they were going to make sure that their Führer was the guy to go. And if you think that the old concept of Führer, Guido von List's idea that there would be one man that would lead the Germans out of bondage after the catastrophe, Hitler fell right into that role and did not mind getting called Führer at all. And if you've ever wondered why they called Hitler Mein Führer, I mean, it does, have the connotation of leadership, but that had history. That idea that he was going to be the guy that pulled Germany out of this apocalypse, that guy was Hitler. He was the one that was going to bring back the Gottmenschen, the supermen, the super soldiers, the Hyperborean race, the Aryans that had history that went all the way back to the beginning. He was going to be the one that was going to do it. One final thing that I'll say about the Thule Society before we move on. Sebottendorf encouraged his members of the Thule Society to greet each other with a particular greeting. And that particular greeting was Sieg Heil. And if you've ever wondered where the Nazi Sieg Heil and then later the Heil Hitler came from, it came straight out of the Thule Society. Straight out of it. So I do have to address something right here, sort of off the bat. When Hitler takes over, and a lot of people, so I should, I guess, kind of pause while we're pausing, there are a lot of people that don't like the concept that Nazis had a cult ideology. There are a lot of historians that poo-poo the whole concept that there were occult ties to the Nazi Party. And one of the people that they will point at is Hitler. And they'll go, oh, look, as soon as Hitler took over, he outlawed the Thule Society. Well, yeah, he did. But here's another thing that he did. He basically outlawed all secret organizations. Now, he wasn't necessarily targeting the Thule Society. He was basically saying, no more secret underground meetings. No more secret society lists. No more weird occultish meetings. And let's ask ourselves why he would have done that. Well, how did he get in power? He got in power by being part of one of these weird secret groups and riding the populist wave into the leadership position. One could also say that he outlawed a lot of these groups because he did not want the competition. And he did not want people plotting behind his back because Hitler was also a super paranoid guy. Okay, what about his speeches? There were actually several speeches where Hitler got up and talked about how secret societies were bad and how all of this mysticism stuff is probably not good for the world, and how we probably need to just focus on the German people and the ideology. And he did say all of that stuff. I don't have any problem at all. He did say it. He spoke it multiple times. We have the records of his speeches where he's talking about this stuff, and that's fine. Hitler might have personally ridden the wave up, got kind of sick of the cult of personality that came from the kind of weird occultish side of things and would just focus on the pure racial ideology. Maybe he did that. We don't know exactly what he's kind of in his brain about. Sect, tech, astronomy, too many secrets. Right. At least as a matter of policy, they endorsed Aryan science, which was pretty woo-woo. Yeah, so we're getting there. But I want to do due diligence and make sure that I cover the opposite side of this. There are a lot of people that say Nazis didn't have anything to do with the occult. Nazis didn't have anything to do with any of this stuff. It was all nationalism. It was all racial ideology. It wasn't weird occulty stuff. However, the big point here is that Hitler was one guy and the Nazi Party was millions. He was not the only Nazi. And let's talk about what Junk Collector said. He's still got some crazy honking ideas. But Hitler, you were in a secret society. Exactly, right? So what about all of the weird stuff that he does with the SS? And we'll talk about the SS more in a little bit. But he limits the membership to his secret personal bodyguard to people that had ancestry of only Aryanism to 1800. Now, where did he get that idea from? He got that idea from the Thule Society. What about the fact that he was down with the world ice doctrine? Like, completely adopted it, was completely down with it. Argued people that argued against the world ice doctrine. Completely wrapped up with the world ice doctrine. What about the whole Spear of Destiny business? And you're like, wait a second, Spear of Destiny? Are we actually going to get into the Spear of Destiny? Yes, Longinus, the Spear of Destiny. There was a group of artifacts that the Austrian government and monarchy sort of held as their kind of crown jewel section or group. They were still a minority of the German population. People that were part of the Nazis, yes. People that believed in Nazi ideology, that's a different story. You didn't have to be in the Nazi Party to be down with a lot of the Volkish ideology. And if you include the people, and this is going to sound really rude to some people in Germany, but it's just the truth. But if you included the people that became okay with it because they didn't want to stand up to Hitler, now you've got a vast majority. So they weren't so un-okay with it that they were willing to stand up and say no to it, if that makes any sense. It should be noted that the German Nazi Party came into power because they were elected into power, and they had the majority of the votes in the Reichstag. Hitler took over because his party and another Volkisch-based nationalist party were able to form a coalition to elect him basically unlimited power by passing laws that effectively, like when they passed a law that said when von Hindenburg died, Paul von Hindenburg was the president of the Weimar Republic at that point. And with his coalition, Hitler passed this law that said after von Hindenburg dies, the presidency doesn't exist anymore, and basically the chancellor becomes everything. So he was able to do that because he had the support of a majority of the seats in the Reichstag. So I'm not trying to argue with it. There were definitely people inside of Germany that did not believe in this stuff, that did not like Hitler, that did not like Nazism, that were not down with all of this. There were a lot of people that just would rather him go jump in a lake. But there are a lot of people that did. Now, whether or not they were full on board with like the World Ice Doctrine and Hyperboreans and Vril and, weird esoteric knowledge, that's probably not the majority of people, no. But there were a lot of them out there. So, what else? Oh, yeah, I was talking about the Spear of Destiny. Okay, so there were these artifacts that the Austrians had in their sort of crown jewel collection, and one of them was a spear. And they claimed it to be originally, well, it's got some interesting provenance, but either the spear was the spear that stabbed Jesus at the cross, or it had a nail of the cross worked into it. So like fashioned into it. Either way, it's called the Spear of Destiny, and it was one of these really big things. And when Hitler took over Austria, there's an action called Anschluss, or unification. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That is a fair point, Vern. And Ethan, I hope you didn't feel like I was coming after you there. Absolutely wasn't meaning to do that if that's the way that it came across. Just trying to sort of zoom out. I definitely agree that the vast majority of people in Germany were not honky, weird, crazy, Nazi, the weird stuff. That the majority of them were not down with the super crazy weird stuff. So I hope you didn't feel like I was coming at you there, because that's not what I was meaning to do. Yeah, the whole Spear of Destiny thing is a whole crazy story on its own. But anyway, so when Hitler took over Austria, one of the things that he had brought into Germany were these artifacts. And including in this group was this spear. And they were like, oh yeah, check this out. We've got this whole spear thing. And he's like, yeah, we should totally keep that. And they made this secret bunker where they were going to keep all of these special treasures that were going to potentially be there to either bail out the Nazi leadership or save the Nazi leadership or grant some sort of power or influence to the Nazi leadership. So into this bunker goes the Spear of Destiny, which is pretty clearly from about the 800s. It's probably Carolingian. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So, I mean, that's kind of weird stuff, right? And also, this whole weird Aryan historical stuff that he believed in, and this scientific concept of superiority, that's based on a lot of weird hokey stuff. So, was Hitler all about the occult stuff? Yeah, if he wasn't on board with the full out level crazy stuff, he tolerated it, and he definitely knew how to use it. And he was probably down with a lot of the weird stuff on the sly. Why anti-Semitism, though? Because to all of these people, the Aryan race was the only race that was pure, and Semitic people were in their ideology, not in mine, in their ideology, were the people that had tainted humanity. So the problems in history and the problems of the world were the Jewish people and the Semitic people. They had seduced the original Aryan women into having sex with them and having kids, and they were propagating these half-demon hybrid things, and the Semitic people were the ones that had hidden the real knowledge of the past that the Aryans were supposed to uncover, and they were the problems inside of Europe because they were the ones with the secret cabals that were setting up all of these world-dominating ideologies that the Germans had to combat. And anti-Semitism is not just something that's German. Anti-Semitism is a historical thing. I could do an entire discussion on the history of anti-Semitism. And we could go all the way back to when the first Jewish people on record had problems with their neighbors because their neighbors were like, one God? That doesn't work. But anti-Semitism was a huge thing, and because it fit neatly into their particular ideology, you got to go after the Jewish people according to the Nazi ideology, because they're the ones that are messing everything up. It is also fair to point out that prior to World War II breaking out, Jewish people inside of Germany made up 0.75% of the population. They were less than 1% of the population inside of Germany. But, of course, the Germans, though, they're the Nazis. You gotta go with the bad guys. Nazis didn't invent it. It was already there because that's how World War I ended and all the crap Germany got into. Yes. So, Grethar, I think we talked about that before you got here, but yeah, we started all the way back in the early 1800s. And if we were just doing the history of anti-Semitism, we could go way on back. Way on back. All right. So once the Nazis take over, regardless of whether or not Hitler is super on board with all the occultic stuff, there are others that are, including this guy, Heinrich Himmler. And let me tell you, Himmler is all down with the occult stuff. This is Heinrich Himmler. Himmler is going to very quickly rise in the ranks of the Nazi command, and he is going to take over as the leader of the Schutzstaffel, which is the SS, the special staff. And when he takes over the SS, this guy turns it into a secret society. He is going to turn the SS into everything that a good old-fashioned Volkish German would love. What happens to the SS? Well, lots of things. For example, he is going to turn this whole thing into a process of application. If you want to apply to get into the SS, it takes you almost 2 years to join, because you have to do tours of service, you have to do work for the people, you have to go through an extensive background check where they dig through all of your records for generations and generations and generations. When you finally get to the end of this 2-year period, you basically go through, well, the only thing that I can say is at an occult ceremony where you are sort of baptized into the SS, and you effectively give the Fuhrer command of your life. You don't get married without the SS approval of your spouse. Once you do get married, you get encouraged to have lots of kids. One of the things that Hitler promoted was, hey, go have lots of babies and make sure that you're having good German babies. And there were actually medals inside of Germany that were given to women who had lots of kids. because he was trying to promote this German ideology, and the SS was right at the top of that. So you have these selected hand-picked members that are effectively brainwashed for 2 years. They're run through this super secret ceremony to get in. Once they get in, they have all of this weird sort of individualized attention. So when you get married by an SS official. When you die, an SS official runs your burial. Like, you might go do a church service for your family, but then your body gets taken to the SS group, and they do special burial services for you. These people watch your everyday life. They watch everything that you do, because you're supposed to be the example of the Supermen. You're supposed to be the first of a new generation of Hyperboreans that are going to take over the world and repopulate it with Gottmenschen. This is stuff that Himmler's really, really thinking here. And we have this stuff on record multiple times. Himmler was deep into this stuff. How deep, you say? Well, pretty honkin' deep. One of the things that Hitler does is consults a whole bunch of mediums and dowsing people and pendulum watchers to try to figure out where he should make sort of the central hideout or the home base for the SS. And they pick this place, which is called Wewelsburg Castle. There aren't too many good pictures of it, but here we go. Wewelsburg Castle. And when he buys this for the SS, he goes inside of it and basically renovates the entire thing. He builds individual rooms for his 12 sub-commanders. Oh yeah, it's a total screw up. Like, these people are brainwashing people. And like, when Himmler builds this castle, he has, and I'm not joking here, a round table put in, because he's going to pick 12 leaders that are going to be his new Teutonic Knights. And when they all have their own individual bed chambers in the castle, and these bed chambers are all decked out in particular period decorations, and they're all dedicated to individual people, like the old leaders of the Holy Roman Empire or particular German soldiers. The name of the castle is Wewelberg, and I should type it here. Well, sometimes you'll see it spelled with 2 W's like this, and sometimes you'll see Wewelsburg with a V, but the middle there is hard to say. Sometimes it's a W. Yes, a literal, but Camelot is a silly place. A round table of Nazis, yes. And at these meetings, we have people that came out, and especially during the Nuremberg trials. It's only a bottle. At the end of World War II, we had these weird people, like not these weird people. I mean, I guess they're kind of weird people, but these discussions where these people will talk about stuff that Himmler's doing, where he'll go to these big meetings and he'll get his 12 knights around him, and he'll start talking about how they're going to plan things and how they're going to do things. And Himmler, by the way, is the guy that comes up with Endlösung, the final solution. This is the guy that comes up with the concept of mass extermination of the Jewish people. He's the guy that puts together the model of burning people in furnaces and gassing them. This is that Heinrich Himmler. And he did a lot of that stuff because he's really big in this weird stuff. But anyway, what I was trying to say is that we have this testimony of these people that talk about Himmler. Like, he'll go into a meeting, but before he goes into a meeting, he'll get his 12 little guys to sit in a circle and concentrate on one idea and point this idea at the person that Himmler's going into the meeting with so that they can use their combined mental power to influence this other guy. I'm not joking. Like, this is on documented, like, people's testimony. They would go into meetings where Himmler would try to go the whole meeting acting like he was one of these old Holy Roman emperors. Like, oh yes, I'm going to be Heinrich the First today. How would Heinrich approach this problem? And he would, like, do the weird accents and stuff of this old... And like, it's just so crazy. I can't tell you how crazy this guy is. But one of the things that I had a hard time finding a picture of, but I did find a picture of it. On the floor of the entryway in Wewelsburg Castle is this symbol. And this is the black sun. And what we have here is a black circle that is representative of the sun. And we have 12 sig runes coming out of it. And if you know anything about modern neo-Nazism, the black sun symbol is what they use a lot. Because if you go to a lot of places inside of Germany, well, basically if you go anywhere in Germany, the use of the swastika in public, either on flyers or in advertisements, is completely banned. So neo-Nazis had to switch to using other symbols. And for a long time, they used the black sun, which was something that Himmler put together and sort of came up with. Sort of this idea of 12s being a thing. But yeah, and now the symbol of the black sun is actually banned as well because of its ties with Nazism. All I really want to know is if they actually tried to summon a baby pancake-loving demon from hell. No, they didn't actually try to summon Hellboy. There are some unverified reports of human sacrifice, but we have to take that with grains of salt because it comes from one guy who was particularly interested in saving his own hide. So, yeah. This guy seems so crazy, he makes you question your own sanity. Right, and I'm telling you, like, the people that argue that Nazis weren't a cult are really arguing that Hitler seemed to kind of give up a lot of the occulty things once he came to power. They don't really like to look at the rest of this stuff that is so clearly out there. Oh yeah, Chef Pete Evans tweeted a black sun meme last summer. I didn't see that, Emmy, but I hope that he got properly chastised. Also, hey Emmy, how are you? He did not originally like pancakes. It was when he ate the pancakes that the residents of Pandemonium knew that he was lost. I'm sure some of them got up to some pretty weird stuff. Yes. Are all these solar disk symbols ruined? Yeah, pretty much. We're talking about Satan. We're talking... Well, if you want to say Heinrich Himmler is Satan, I don't think that's too big of a stretch. I don't know. Like, I don't really know your opinion of Satan. Some other people's opinions of Satan is actually... Anyway, we won't get into all of that. Also, hey Tuna, what's up? And they murdered lots of people who was sacrificed as a matter of semantics. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And that... Moose, let's get back... And I don't know if you were here at the very beginning. Point number one of the entire discussion was Nazis are bad, and we should not do what Nazis did, and the Holocaust was horrible, and all of this stuff should have been avoided. That was like literal point number one out of the gate. Are they hiding on the dark side of the moon? I don't know. If they are, is the moon made of ice? You're a part of the Twitter mob? Okay, cool. All right, so another thing that Himmler came up with, and you're going like, wait, how much more did Himmler come up with? Quite a bit. A group called the Ahnenerbe. Yes, Ahnenerbe. And if we translated that into English, it literally means what the historical people left us, or some people want to say what our fathers left us. So a cultural society that is going to look into our ancestral heritage. So a lot of people, if you're doing research in English and you see reference to the Nazi Ancestral Heritage Society, what they're talking about is the Ahnenerbe here. And the Ahnenerbe is the people that fought Indiana Jones. It's really the only way that I can say it. Let's look at their image. Deutsche Ahnenerbe. And we have, of course, our good old-fashioned runes, because, you know, runes are a thing. We have our sword, because this is going to be a subdivision of the SS, and Hitler is all about some swords. In certain other versions of the Thule Society, especially if you look at a lot of Thule Society publications, you would see this particular sword, and it would have a swastika sort of overlaid behind it here in the sort of negative space behind it. So if you Google Thule Society and look up a lot of their images, you're going to see the same sort of sword here with a swastika over the cross here. Yes, SS words. Oh, I see what you did there. I'll take S words. Oh, Sean Connery would not approve of the Ahnenerbe. Is that hilt offline with the blade, or is it just messing with your eyes? It is slightly offline with the blade, yes. It is slightly off to the left. Wonk groups always love to co-op a vague other culture to ruin. Yeah, pretty much. But they're establishing their history. They're drawing those lines back through time. And the Ahnenerbe is specifically designed to do that. So the Ancestral Heritage Society, what are these people doing? They are literally part of the SS. They are not military officers. The SS, by the way, was sort of an army within the army of the Nazi regime. So you had the Nazi army, but then you had the SS, which was sort of, and I keep going back to this word secret society, but at this point, it's a cult. It really is a cult. To get into it, you had to go through the initiation. You're brainwashed. You're giving over all of your personal control to the charismatic leader. You're allowing their ideology to completely warp you out. This is a cult. The SS was a cult. And they were occult-ish as a cult, too. So the Ahnenerbe are archaeologists, historians, literary critics, writers, and their job is to justify Aryan superiority. They were the ones that were tasked with creating the backstory of the Aryan people. So if you ever want to know where a lot of the Nazi propaganda came from, these people. These are the ones that are going to go out and do all of the weird archaeological expeditions. For example, they go up to Finland. Scary Mother Truckers. Yes, these people are weird. And the reason I say that they're the ones that fight with Indiana Jones is because these would have been the people that were going out looking for the weird, powerful artifacts. And the secret books. And the bad guys that are the Nazis in Indiana Jones are almost certainly SS officers in the Ahnenerbe. Almost certainly. And now that I just said that, I would actually like to see if I could try to find what the dress uniforms of these people looked like, to see if I could match those with the people in Indiana Jones, to see if old Georgie boy did his homework. This seems to have a lot of parallels with the Lost Cause narrative in the South. It does. The idea that we can write history how we want to justify how we act. That is the exact same thing. That is a great point, Brittany. This is the same sort of ideology. We don't have to play with facts because we have a view over here that doesn't base ourselves on facts. So we're going to take what facts that we want and write our own to justify how we feel because we're right and you're wrong and we say so. Did they make any legitimate archaeological discoveries? Some. Yes. Yes, they did. They did some excavation work inside Germany. They did some excavation work inside Italy. Some of these people published works that still get cited today. Now, does that mean that the people that were in it were just doing it because it was a job, or did they buy into the ideology? That's a lot harder to tell. That is a really difficult situation to tell, because one of the things that we have to remember is that there was this big backlash against intellectuals. Like the whole world ice doctrine caught on because it was pushing back against established narratives, and it let everybody believe what they wanted to, regardless of whether or not the educated said so. So if you were an educated individual that got approached by the Ahnenerbe and they said, we want you to join us, if you told them no, is that a death sentence? Did you join up with the weird Nazi occultish Himmler guy because you needed to find a way to keep your family safe? Or did you really believe in that stuff? That's a deeper question that we really don't have a lot of answers to. Are they the ones that came up with the idea that Joseph was Aryan and therefore Jesus was Aryan? Yeah, basically anybody that was anybody was an Aryan. However, Himmler was a pagan. Himmler wanted to go back to old pre-Christian paganism, and he actively tried to wipe out Christianity. He really did. Rewriting history to fit a racist slant. Absolutely. That is a great way of putting it. Nazism also got into academia in a bad way. Yes, absolutely. Because again, like, for you to be considered an academic and to make a living as an academic under this Nazi regime, you kind of had to go along with it, because if you didn't go along with it, you were going to get ostracized. You might get thrown into a work prison. You might end up in Dachau. Dachau originally was not a concentration camp. It was a prisoner camp. And a lot of the people that ended up in Dachau to begin with weren't targeted because of their Jewish race or their Roma culture. They were thrown in there because they were political dissidents, people that did not agree with the German ideology that was being pushed by the Nazis. So a lot of those people are stuck in really crappy situations, and I'm certain that there were some people that went along with it because it was either that or die. And I'm not trying to say that justifies it, but I don't know if I could have done anything different because I've never been in that position, and I hope that I never am. Anyway, so what's up with these Ahnenerbe people? Well, let's talk about some of the places that they went to. So one of their expeditions, and one of their first ones, was up to Finland. And they went up to Finland, which was, of course, part of the Nordic tradition. And, they were okay, those Finns. And they went up to the particular northern parts of the region. And this is partially because of the Kalevala. One of these old sagas had become really important. And Himmler was like, oh, yeah, I should read all this stuff. And they got really interested in it. And it's like, oh, well, we've got to go find some of this stuff. So one of the things that Himmler wanted to do in Finland was find remnants of the original Germanic paganism. So he sent archaeologists and cultural experts up into Finland looking for, and I'm not joking here, witches. He wants to find witches and people that follow the really old pagan traditions here in Finland to learn from them, because he thinks that they might have sort of parts of that secret knowledge that had been lost. Have you read Gravity's Rainbow? It covers some of the questions of why some people worked with the Nazis. I have not. Gravity's Rainbow. Let me... Tuna, would you be so kind as to throw that into the stream chat for on our Discord? Otherwise, I will probably forget it and forget to look it up. You find the actual magic unnerving. It's always the witches. Yeah, it's always the witches. Right? So we want to go find this original knowledge. And we want to find it from the original people, because if we can find esoteric knowledge in Finland, we can prove that the Nordic people are Aryan. And if that knowledge matches the stuff that's over in Asia, well, then it's clear that our Aryan heritage comes from both East and West. Boom, Aryans are the best. Boom, kill everybody else. I'm not joking. This is stuff that really happens. Right next door, Sweden. Do I have an Amazon wish list? I do not. I appreciate the concept that you might even be thinking about purchasing a book for me. That is not needed, my friend, but I appreciate it. Here in Sweden, it turns out that there are a lot of runes and petroglyphs. So we need to go up and catalog all of these. We need to go find all of these runes and petroglyphs, and we need to create a body or a corpus of these, and we need to translate them, and we need to reevaluate them based on our knowledge, because they might have the secret knowledge. And actually, one of the petroglyphs that shows up fairly frequently, and I could not find a decent picture of it, is a man who sort of is holding up his arms like this and has sort of a glowy thing over his head. And one of the Ananarb archaeologists says this petroglyph is the super soldier or the Superman. And the reason it shows up a lot is because these people knew who the super people were, because we're getting closer to Thule, right? Because the further north you go, the closer to Thule you're actually getting. So these people had contact with Thule, and this petroglyph that we see all the time is a representation of the godmen. You have an Amazon list? It's mostly model kits. Oh, Cave. Well played there. Your books are mostly books? Yeah. Thomas Pynchon just doesn't resonate with me. When I was at school, mine was mostly books too. My Amazon wish list right now would be trying to find Turkish chocolate for my wife, or trying to find Jordanian candy bars. There's a candy bar from Jordan called Sahara, and oh my gosh, it's so good. I brought an entire box home with me when I came back from Jordan, and I can't find it anymore. And I haven't even found it online. So now you're old and you want your hobbies. Oh, yes, the cherry juice. Oh, Figment. I forgot to tell you that when I was in Greece, I found that cherry juice, and it's let out by another company that actually gets it from the same supply. So for those of you that don't know, there's a lot of arguing historically between Greek people and Turkish people. So there's this really, really great cherry juice that's in Turkey. And I found it when I was in Greece because I was hoping to find that cherry juice again because it's amazing. It's Sahara, spelled like the desert. I found it. And I can't remember the name of it, but I took a picture of the label. So it is also in Greece. And I've tried to find... Well, when I got back from Greece, I tried to find a way to import it from Greece, and I was not able to find it. Anyway, it's the simple things that I try to dig for on the internet, like Kremali cookies from Ulker brand in Turkey. I've actually found a supplier of those. There's a place in New Jersey that imports from Turkey, and I can buy Kremalis. So, yeah. Vern, if you're toying with my heart and telling me that you have a line on Sahara bars, I would be very upset with you. Apple soda, is it Apple Fanta? Because Apple Fanta from Turkey is amazing. You can get Apple Fanta in a couple of other countries around the Mediterranean as well. I've had it in Jordan, in Turkey, in Greece. Apple Fanta is amazing. It's always the food and drinks that we want. Yeah. You would think the text of this research, like interviewing Finnish witches, Still be accessible? I don't know. That would be really super interesting to see if I could dig up some of that stuff. I don't know if any of that is still around. But of course now I want to dig it up and look at it. What's the name of the Jersey seller? Spill the tea or across the border? I'll have to go pull it back out of my records. I have a whole series of places that I've dug for. You might be able to find them. You have a large Middle Eastern Greek population. Yeah, and see, that's a thing. Like there's a Jordanian restaurant here in town, and they can't get any of it. So anyway, that we're talking about food, which is one of the most common tangents that people get me off on. And I can chase down food tangents forever. I love food and I love beverages and I enjoy Greek baklava. Oh yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of different baklavas. I like the baklavas that have pistachios. I know that some people prefer the baklavas that don't use pistachios. They either use like macadamia nuts or I've even had peanuts on there. But there's a Greek Orthodox church not far from you. Oh, is that the? Oh, I think I've read about them. I think I've read them or read about them. Are they Romanian? Like, I know it's a Greek Orthodox church, but are the people that run it a Romanian community? I can't remember. Maybe. Anyway. What's your favorite Nazi-related food? Fanta counts. Fanta was originally a Nazi sort of thing. It was made as a way to keep the Coca-Cola company from being able to run stuff inside of Germany during the war. It wasn't Fanta. It was in a little mini glass bottle. Your old neighbor. Oh, wow. That's a neighbor, yeah. Sweets from Turkey. Edelweiss, Edelweiss. Yep. Meanwhile, the Germans are trying to find mystics and halloumi in Finland. Right, yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Back on topic. Before we go away, I have thought about putting a Channel Point Redemption in that is literally called Just Get On With It. And that's a reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it would be a very low cost thing, maybe like 10 or something points, where if I get off on a tangent, people can just go, get on with it. Would that be something you all are interested in? I'm always interested in new Channel Point redemptions. There's a whole thing in the Discord for suggestions. So if you can come up with neat Channel Point redemptions, you're welcome to throw those in there. You like tangents. I like tangents too, but sometimes people just want me to shut up and get along with it. Okay, so on another thing, another one of their expeditions is to Tibet. And the Tibet expedition is probably the one that is most publicized, and they go over to Tibet, and the purpose is basically to find the connection between the hidden masters of Tibet, the occult leadership, knowledge, wise people, and prove that they're Aryans. It's like, if we can just go over to Tibet and talk to a lot of these people and get through a lot of the sort of the yin yang about things and figuring out who they are and making all these connections, if we can just prove that they're Aryans, this will prove that everything that we've done is legit, right? Why not? Why shouldn't we keep tangents? I love you all. I'm supposed to be creating tangents, but it seems like I need to make tangents back to the topic. Channel points to redeem a tangent. We could do that, like tangent, and then you have to supply something that relates tangentially, and we have to go off on the tangent. That might be worthwhile. I'd probably have to make that one a little bit more expensive, because otherwise it would just be nothing but tangents. Could you do a tangent to a tangent? That would be the ultimate question, because if so, we would never get back to the topic. I might have to put a limit on how many tangents we could run per night that were redeemable tangents, not the ones that occur naturally. Anyway, so we go over to Tibet. We spend all this time and this money. We send all of our cultural explorers and our archaeologists, and we go over to Tibet, and we find out, oh yeah, they're Aryans. They're totally Aryans, and we come back and we publicize everything. Oh yeah. We've proven that they're Aryans and yada yada yada. But the Ananarb is, you can summon the puppy right now if you want to. But the Ananarb is going to do archaeological stuff all over the world. They are doing digs in Africa, doing digs all over Europe, all over Central Asia. They're going as far away as China and India. And the purpose of this, again, is to justify the ancestral heritage of Aryanism, because Himmler is just absolutely wrapped up with this idea that the Aryan race has to be proven legitimately through historical proof, through documented proof, and there's no way that this could not work, because to him, the only way that all of his stuff is justified is if he gets his background stuff. So we give point redemptions back to you, the people. All right. Permits? Pretty much. Okay, so clearly there is a lot of weird occult ideology wrapped up in this idea of Nazism. And the Nazis both started off as a popular movement and embraced all of this weird pseudoscience along the way. And even if Hitler, again, Hitler himself clearly had some sort of issue with some of these people. Maybe it was with the people, maybe it was the ideology. But the group of Nazi leadership, including his right-hand man Hess, Hans Frank, the guy that was running Poland, Heinrich Himmler, these people that are top-level Nazis were way into this weirdo stuff and used it to justify the murder of millions, used it to justify all of the horrible things that the Nazis did during World War II. And even if Hitler himself was not, summoning Hellboy, there was a lot of occult stuff wrapped up in this. And it was not always pitched as, black magic. Sometimes it was pitched as history. Sometimes it was pitched as science. Sometimes it was pitched as, nationalism. But at the end of the day, what this really is a weird and jacked up version of a way to look at the world that is based around this idea that I have special knowledge that you do not possess. And that is a cult. And the SS are the best examples of that. The fact that the SS were at the core of Nazi leadership and ideology is an example of that. The fact that Hitler has discussions with Rudolf Hess every day, and Hess is super deep into this stuff, means that Hitler knows it. And even if Hitler doesn't necessarily bathe in it, he is bathed in it. Like, this is stuff that's all around him. When does Rasputin come into the story? Rasputin is Russian. And he was over doing weird stuff in Russia before Hitler was ever in power. We're specifically looking at Nazi occultism tonight. Only when the dancing song comes on. Oh, yeah. Hidden dark magic. All right. So that wraps up the amount of material that I had prepared for tonight. However, as always, that does not mean that we have to be done. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, if you want to bring in some outside opinions or throw some stuff into the conversation for chat, weird stuff in Russia. That's a bit redundant. I would love to go to Russia. Russia has a lot of cool people. Not all of Russia is weird. But Rasputin was working with the Germans to summon Hellboy. How did the Nazis feel about potatoes? I'm sure they ate potatoes. And Techman, also, hey Techman, welcome, my friend. Techman has asked for the puppy, so let me call the puppy, who I think is probably asleep on the couch, so it might take just a second. Here comes the Kaylee Poo. Come and see me. Come here. Come on. The people have asked to see you. Come on. Oh, yes, there's the puppy. Hello. Give me some oh, there's the puppy sugars. Give me sugars. Oh, my goodness. So excited. So excited. There's the puppy. Oh, yes, we can throw the puppy. Where are you going? Hey, where are you going? Come here. Come here. Come on. Are you going to talk to me? Well, come on. Come and see me. Hey, come here. Woof. I don't know what you're saying. Use your words. Come here. Come. Woof. Come here. Come on. Come here. There we go. There's a good girl. There we go. Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You want your toy back? Oh, is that what you wanted the whole time? Or now you're mad at me because I took your toy away to get you to show up on screen? Are you leaving now? Yeah. Oh yeah, she's full of vim and vigor. Oh, she's been awake and wanting to play. Do you know that there's a whole amazing swordsmen and sorcerers of Hyperborea? I did not know that, Cave. That does sound interesting, though. The people have come to praise and adore the puppy. Puppy, unite us to feel our love. At last, someone has summoned something. She's just judging us. She judges everybody, so. You love the dog? She's a mess, for certain. Who would have taken power in Germany if Hitler was assassinated? For instance, if one of the commanders blew him up in a bunker. There were some people that were willing to follow Himmler. In fact, he had a fairly sizable amount of support inside of the Nazi upper command. There were a few other people. Hess was probably not one of them. A lot of people didn't trust Hess very much. He was way too much of a sort of like a sycophant for Hitler. Goring had a little bit of potential, but probably not. I doubt Goebbels would have been in charge. It would have probably been somebody that was in the leadership of the Nazi Party, but not necessarily in Hitler's direct line of command. So it's hard to say. You have been found wanting. She'd stay if you offered pancakes. Oh, yeah, of course. Who wouldn't stay if I offered pancakes, right? All right. Who would have taken power if young Hitler had been accepted by the Academy of Arts? Well, the Weimar Republic would have probably just tottered on. It was not necessarily a strong government, but it would have probably tottered and tottered and tottered until it eventually picked up steam, but who knows? All right. Anybody else have questions? Want to redeem any channel points? I do want to remind everybody that we are running a follower goal. If you've enjoyed what you've seen tonight and you are not already a follower, you can click that follow button for free, and you will bring us one step closer to having a fourth installment of History of Middle-earth. Middle-earth, of course, being J.R.R. Tolkien's favorite things. And I quite like Tolkien's work, so I have studied it a lot. I've read a whole lot about it, and, well, I basically get on stream and teach it like it's kind of a class, or basically like the same way that we've been doing tonight. I just talk about what am I trying to say here? I'm losing my brain. I talk about Lord of the Rings history just like I'm talking about history here as if it were real. But there we go. How much do you know about Cane Corso? I know it's a big honking dog, and that's about all that I know about it. It is interesting to me, as much as the Nazis were into a cult, they virulently hated quantum physics, whereas seemingly every movement after tries to co-opt it. See, well, that's the thing, Junk Collector. It's because the quantum physics side was telling them that their versions of science were wrong, and they didn't like hearing that. So the anti-intellectual stuff that was wrapped into the Volkisch movement and the Nazi ideology would accept their version of science, but hated all the other versions of science. 2 What's in the Newses, and a rank 3 things, sites you'd want to visit anywhere on the African continent. Okay, that's great. Okay, so let's do 2 things in the news. One thing right off the top that sort of is a tangent for tonight, but I've got to kind of talk about it because it's a big deal. So inside of Israel right now, and for the last about 3 days, there has been a lot of exchange of fire and ordnance. There's a whole situation that has started because of a Supreme Court decision inside of Israel to basically evict several Palestinian families from a particular area that is near the Temple Mount / the Al-Aqba Mosque. Basically the Dome of the Rock, the big mosque that you know about. It's also the holy site to Jewish people. It's where the Jewish temple used to be. And not too far away from that, there is a Palestinian community, and several families within that community have been told that they have to vacate their land. This was the result of a case where a group of Jewish individuals brought suit against the current Palestinian owners, saying that they owned the land prior to the that particular land being given to the Jordanian kingdom. For those of you that do not know, at the end of World War I, most of the Ottoman Empire became basically colonies of the British and the French, and there's this one big region called Palestine, which is today the countries of Israel and Jordan. When Britain gave that up in the 40s, they made 2 countries. One was called Transjordan, which included all of what is today Jordan, and a big area called the West Bank, and part of what is East Jerusalem. And at that time period, there were these Palestinians who purchased this land and were given deeds to that land by the Jordanian government. However, in 1967, at the end of the 67 war, the Jewish government occupied the West Bank, and there's a big case going down on who actually controls that land. The Jewish Supreme Court has said that the Jewish people bringing suit actually own that land, and the Palestinians that have been living there since the 40s have to leave. And this has caused a pretty big stir-up because the Palestinians claim that the Jewish courts are biased towards Jewish claimants and unfairly, discriminate against Palestinian land ownership, especially in that area. And so it has turned into a big thing. There have been lots of protests about this. And there are people within the Gaza Strip that started firing rockets. First targeting Jerusalem, and then today targeting the city of Ashkelon, which is a little bit further south in Israel. Let me turn on the borders here. So this is the Gaza Strip here. It's part of the land that Israel occupied at the end of 67 during the war there. And so the Palestinians within the Gaza Strip have been shooting rockets at both Jerusalem and Ashkelon. The Israeli military, especially their Air Force, has responded by bombing some of the areas inside of the Gaza Strip, but this is escalating. Gaza Strip Palestinians shot about 200 missiles towards Ashkelon today. Now, the Israeli government on the other side of the Gaza Strip border has a very sophisticated anti-rocket missile defense system. It's called the Iron Dome. That shot down a lot of them, but there have been deaths from that. This is getting a lot of people pretty worried. This is the most violent exchange between these two groups in about a decade, and the political situation within Israel right now is unstable already because they've had so many elections and don't have a ruling government. So that's something you need to keep an eyeball on, and definitely pay attention to that particular place if you are so inclined to keep up with world news. And I need to catch up with the chat here. Dealer's choice. Yes, there are going on. You've got a Doberman Pinscher. That's what the Nazis did to that dog. I did not know that. I'm just going to do Israel. Yes, Israel's getting itself in trouble again. There's trouble brewing. Wasn't there a redemption for a viewer request? There were. Give me just a minute and we'll get to that. Been a while. I wonder how much the relief for the displaced people that cost those rockets and missiles could have provided. Mac, I see where you're going, and I don't know the answer to that. I am one that would suggest that violence is, unfortunately, higher on the list of priorities than it should be, and wading into the Palestinian-Israel discussion is something that I probably shouldn't do. I know all of the facts of the scenario, but it is a very charged topic, and I should probably be wise to sort of stay away from that. Not that I don't have opinions on that, just that I should probably keep my mouth shut. How about that? All right, what else is going on in the news? So there was one, the Israel thing is pretty bad, and that is probably the number one thing I would keep an eyeball on. We could talk about the response of the Indian government to COVID, but I feel like we talked about that last week. One thing we can talk about, and this is something that's happening globally, and I was actually talking about this with Mac and KP earlier or maybe at the end of last week. There's been a lot of data that has come out in the last few days that talks about global population dropping, not growing as fast as it has been. A drop in the amount that we are adding to the populations. More news just came out today about China, how Chinese populations have dropped, and there's a lot of consternation and a lot of worry about how this is going to have impacts on the human race as a whole. A lot of people are talking about the level that people need to have babies to replace the generation that's dying and all of this stuff. I want to make something that's probably a little bit more aware for you all, though. When you see people arguing about people not having enough babies, like, oh, they're just not having enough babies, look who they are, like who they are, what they stand for, and then try to figure out if they're actually arguing about economics. Because the real big issue that is actually scaring a lot of these people that are saying they just need to have more kids, what they're really worried about is this concept of perpetual economic growth. That's what they're really worried about. Like, oh, for an economy to be healthy, it's got to constantly grow and constantly grow and constantly grow. And if people aren't having babies, there aren't going to be consumers. That's what a lot of the people are worried about. So keep an eyeball on that. Population growth in the United States has gone down substantially. Population growth in China has gone down. I suspect that on the other side of COVID, in a lot of the other countries that have growing populations, we're going to see drops in birth rates. But keep an eye on who's complaining. And if they're actually complaining about economics, that's a different thing. Israel, you're in our prayers. And let me be very clear. I don't want anybody to get blown up by a rocket or by a bomber plane. I don't want anybody to die deaths in war. I'm not pro-violence. So let me just say that. Korea is also not great path of the birth rate. Yes. One of my friends is expecting his 9th boy. Wow. Anyone wants to pester me about having babies, I'll just borrow a couple of his. We're about to have another addition in my extended family. I don't have any kids, and I don't plan on having any kids, but our extended family is about to get a little bit bigger. How do you support the people in retirement? See, that's an economic question. If your population decreases, supporting a lower population has become increasingly crushing the younger generations, and China has a very large population. It's promised to support. Yeah. Maybe unlimited spending 20 years ago was not the right way to go in China. All right, Figment. Sites in Africa. 3 places I want to go. Cairo to see the big pyramids. Sudan to see where all the rest of the pyramids are. Great Zimbabwe. In that order. There you go, Figment. Sorry. Apologies. There's your 3 sites. You're curious to how the Jewish people will be blamed for all of this? We need to do what Japan is doing and make elderly care robots. I don't know. The Japanese population is going to be one of the hardest ones hit because their population is not growing very fast at all, and they're having very, very, very few children in Japan. Not that this comes up about my birthday and city you were born, but if it follows the same date to the Munich massacre of the summer. Oh, Techman, that is an unfortunate occurrence that has nothing to do with you, but just your schedule. If you didn't have Zoom class, you'd be fine to wait all day. China has plenty of problems. It probably shouldn't get started. U.S. historically solves the problem with extreme high immigration numbers. Except immigration has been going down. And there we go. All right, Figment. Have a good one. Take it easy. Thanks for hanging out. It's been fun. Okay. So I am Batbird asked about viewer point redemption options. And yes, there are viewer point redemption options. There is one for your first adventure. If you are choosing your first adventure, you need 10,000 points. If you have already chosen an adventure and you are choosing your second adventure, you need 20,000 points. So my question is, I am Batbird, do you have 10,000 points, and are you ready to redeem that request? Because if so, I can turn that on right now. Whew! Wow, that's that's a lot. Batbird, are you still with me? You're still a Batbird. No, I guess that would be you're still a Batbird. Because, well, I mean, I don't know. Are you always Batbird? Luckily, your family was not close to the event. Yeah, that's luck. Okay. You don't have it yet. All right. So I can ask anybody. Are there any viewers in the crowd tonight that have both the points needed and an idea that you would like to redeem right now? You're just curious. Yeah. So Batbird, what happened is I left those on, and it ended up accumulating a whole bunch of viewer requests episodes, and I ended up having about 5 of them sitting on the plate at one time, and I felt like people were redeeming the channel point redemption and then having to wait like 2 months to watch their video. So I wanted to make that a little bit more immediate. Batman will. Indeed, I love the tick. You got them points, but you don't know what you would redeem. And that's okay. You don't have to redeem anything right now. I'm just asking if there are people that have the points and want to do a redemption. Anybody? If not, we're going to need to have ourselves a good old-fashioned poll. All right, so I'm not seeing response. So I'm guessing that everybody is just ready for a poll. So here's what we do on viewer request nights. I am about to make a poll, and I will be populating that poll with your suggestions. And I'm going to take, starting right now, whatever topics you would like to cover. But we're going to take the next 3, and the first one, we're going to have 4 options. The first one is the carryover of number 2 from last time. Last time when we voted, Nazi occultism won hands down, and the second one was Portuguese exploration of the New World. Portuguese exploration and colonization of the New World. Portuguese New World colonies. And there's a limit to how many things I can put in. I gotta do the history of hip hop. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could do that in one show. If you're interested in the history of hip hop, I would encourage you to go watch the Netflix series Hip Hop Revolution. Really, really, really good show. One day, want to see our collection in museum in the Philly. It'll be redeemed. History of tabletop role-playing games. Okay. Tabletop role-playing games. That's... I don't know if there's enough there. Is that like the story of Gary Gygax? History of foods in the Americas and Europe. That's bigger, and I can talk about a lot of things there. Oh wow, history of Israel is way too broad. I would need a much more narrow scope. Are you talking about like Israel as in the modern country of Israel, or Israel as in everything that's ever happened in Israel? Random. History of history. What do we got here? Just Amerigo Vespucci. I don't think I could do an entire episode on just Amerigo Vespucci. If you want to talk about Italians that explored stuff in the New World, I could do that. We'll just call that Italian explorers. So the history of history is like that. I could probably okay, let's do history of modern Israel. How about that? I don't know what I would do with tabletop history. I don't know if that would be something I could get enough out of. All right, so we're about to start a poll. Boom, here we go. And if you go up to the top, you will see a poll. And if you click the little down arrow that looks like this, you get to vote. And everybody that's in the room gets to vote. It doesn't matter if you are a follower. It doesn't matter if you've never been here before. It doesn't matter if you have, 5 channel points or 5,000 channel points. You get to vote. Whatever you want, you get to vote for. And we've run the the thing here for 3 minutes, so that should be enough time for everybody to get involved. Ooh, we get lots of participation. There are people voting. Yay! Sometimes it's like 2, 3. Everybody gets to vote. Again, you don't have to follow. You don't have to be a sub. If you are listening to the sound of my voice, you get to vote in the poll. We could do history of it. We could do electricity. We could do corn. I don't know, corn. I guess I could bring that into modern day and talk about like corn lobby. Probably. History of electricity. Female inventors. We could do female inventors. That would be pretty easy. Concentration camps and Jewish ghettos. Yeah, that'd be a tough one. We could do it though. Modern history. Amazing aspects of history. Postmodernists. What do you vote for? American foods includes a lot of stuff. Corn, tomatoes, potatoes. Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be involved in that. Yeah, we could do corn in there. I was thinking like sugar and tobacco, and I was going to put potatoes in there because I know Moose has been excited about potatoes. Tamales. Sugar would probably be one of the biggest ones because, I mean, their entire economic structure is built around sugar. All right, hurry up and vote. We are approaching the end. We are coming around to the end. Looks like History of Modern Israel is going to squeak out the win. Does tobacco count? I would say so. You know, we're going to go on a food tangent. All right, so our next viewer request episode will be the history of modern Israel. And we will be factual and direct, and we will try to be fair to everybody involved. And hopefully we won't step on toes. However, history is not always comfortable, and it's not always what we want it to be. Portugal, always the bridesmaid, but never the bride. But it gets to come back next time. It will be in the next round. Portuguese New World colonies. And I think there's a lot of stuff there that we could talk about. Memorable catchphrases of history. Lethal crossbreed of tobacco and tomatoes. Next week's episode will be titled Shane Gets Canceled. I hope not. I hope not. But we'll see. What if you don't want historical events to have happened? That's the unfortunate thing about history. It happened regardless of whether or not we want it. It happened. All right, ladies and gents, we are going to go do a raid. And we are going to go raid Amanda Conda Creates. Amanda Conda Creates is a delightful streamer who does sculpting and currently working on an orc, which has been growing over time. Please show Amanda Conda some love when we get there. And fun fact, if you throw follows, you might convince Amanda Conda to sing for you. So there we go. And go ahead, hit the button. Yeah. So thank you all so much for hanging out. I will point out that my justification for starting early has played true, because had we started at our normal time, it would now be way past my wife's bedtime. So, history of racism at Shane's employer. Oh, I would get fired for that. We could do history of racism. I wouldn't have a problem. Well, I guess I would have a problem with that being too broad. We'd have to narrow it down. All right, so thank you so very much for participating today. It has been a great episode. I appreciate everybody's input. Thank you all so very, very much. Our next stream is Thursday at our normal time. We're going back to our normal time. And we will be talking about the Parthians and the Armenians in our 1st century AD time period. When we get to Amanda Conda's channel, as always, please do share our battle cry, which is adventure, and then throw as many of those lovely adventure hats as you can into the chat. You all are awesome. You all make doing this so easy and so fun. I really appreciate everybody hanging out, and I will see you next time.